I'm very excited to announce a new webinar coming up at Renegade University. It's a webinar that's been much in demand, actually. It's my introduction to postmodernism. It's called What is Postmodernism? And it'll be taught live November 2nd at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can go to thaddeusrussell.com/courses to get more information and to register for the course. There are also a few tickets left for the weekend with me at Renegade University in Los Angeles, November 10th to the 12th. Again, you can go to my site, thaddeusrussell.com/courses for more information and to buy tickets to the weekend. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. I'm supposed to disavow this week's guest, but I'm not going to. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed saying even that. What I do wish is that more people allowed themselves to be challenged by Jim Goad's ideas, and especially the incredible stories of his life. So I'm sitting with Jim Goad in Los Angeles, and this podcast is about people who say things that you're not supposed to say in polite society. And so I've spent the last few days researching Jim, and I knew a little bit about him. I knew that he was terribly notorious and dangerous and potentially evil, so I was intrigued. But so I've been reading you and watching you and listening to you for several days now, steeping myself in all things Jim Goad. And I have to say, you kind of play it safe. I mean, you're sort of you're kind of surfing the mainstream all the time. There's not a whole lot that I find cutting edge. So I do think, though, the one thing that I find interesting, so we're just going to limit this podcast to discussion on this topic,
yes,
is your middle name, which I think is outstanding and does actually sort of push the boundaries of polite society here.
I think, whether or not I'm not cutting edge, I think you need to do a preemptive disavowal just to cover your own ass.
No, I'm not going to do that shit.
All right. Okay. Well,
can we talk about your middle name?
You've been warned, yeah. My mom named me, at 8 days, my middle name, my baptism name in the Catholic Church was Thaddeus, James Thaddeus Goad. And she made a point of telling me it was after St. Jude Thaddeus, the patron saint of hopeless causes. What I did in those 8 days to give her the sense that I was hopeless, I'll never know. I was a giant baby. I was 9 pounds, 10 3/4 ounces. Maybe I had a bad attitude. I know there was violence. There was natal violence. My dad punched her in the stomach when she was pregnant with me. And according to my siblings, there was glass broken over my father or brother's head when they got into a fight near my crib, and glass fell on me straight back. I'm not sure if that was pre or post baptism, but yes, Thaddeus for the patron saint of hopeless causes.
Mm-hmm.
And she always made a point of telling me I was planned too, and I didn't even have a concept of what that meant. So I figured that was a mistake.
Huh. So we could call the history of Jim Goad the history of violence in some ways, right?
That's the second chapter of Ship Magnets, the lingering effects of prenatal violence.
Yeah, but it's kind of followed you through your life, hasn't it? You've experienced violence. You've done violence.
Given, taken. My oldest brother, who was 17 years older than me, was a deaf mute, was murdered in Paris in 1969. The best thing I've ever written, you can find it online, it's called Ode to Bucky Goad. And I didn't find out until later. I mean, he was so far removed from me, I didn't know much. I just swallowed my parents' stories. My mom told me he was born deaf. Apparently he wasn't. He was born and he got scarlet fever, and she didn't take him to the hospital, and he became deaf as a result of that. Had a tragic life, and wound up being stabbed 30 to 40 times and strangled with his own belt in Paris the night he got there on vacation in 1969. And that, I mean, when you're 8 years old and that happens, that sort of takes away a lot of the innocence.
I'd say so.
It's around the same age like a lot of the grandmothers and aunts were dying too. So I got exposed to death pretty young.
And you were beaten, right, by your parents?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah.
Both of them.
Until I hit both of them back. Hit mom back around 12 and dad around 16. Dad chased me through the house. I was a theater guy in my teens, and so I was in Godspell. I was Jesus. You familiar with Godspell?
A little bit.
You did these wacky hippie like Jesus musicals, and Jesus Christ Superstar was another one.
Yep.
But there was this girl Lenore that I knew, and I was around 16. It was the first person I had adult-style conversations. We late into the night and talk about things other than what band you were into. And she moved out, and she called me. She moved to another town. We were talking on the phone. Dad came home pissed drunk, grabbed the phone out of my hand, chased me upstairs, chased me downstairs. When we squared off in the living room, I grabbed his wrist to stop him, and he just gave me this disgusted look like you don't even deserve to touch me. And I gave him a left hook and knocked him on his ass, broke his dental plate in half, and never hit me again.
Good for you. God damn it, I love that story.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's, I mean, I get into that chapter too. I think people are naive to think that violence isn't really the way of the universe.
How old were you?
I was 16 when
I was 16 when I hit my father, but
Okay.
I only punched him in the chest with a kind of weak straight right. I wish I'd had the hook in my arsenal then.
He was I only got one punch as the left hook. He was so drunk, he went down to the basement because his dental plate was cracked in half, and he was using glue to try to glue it back together.
And it worked. He never hit you again?
Never hit me again, but like my older brother threatened to come up from Florida to kick my ass. My brother-in-law, who had the worst toupee of all time, he took me for a little ride, and he said, he was so square. He was Squaresville, USA. He's like, if I ever catch you doing this again, I'll beat you so bad it'll take 100 pot sticks to get you up off the ground. He called them pot sticks, joints. He was like 1950s blackboard jungle lingo with drugs and everything.
Huh.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, a lot of chaos. So that's where I came from.
Yeah.
And I don't know enough about neurology. I think that gets cellular after a while. That's encoded into you.
Yeah, I've heard you say that you think you have PTSD from it.
A lot of people have said that. When Answer Me was actually taught at the University of Berkeley, and it was an example of narrative trauma, an example of a narrator who had been traumatized.
Wait, so this was sort of like their example of a pathology, like you were? Is that what
I was a
used?
walking pathology.
Yeah, because they're not celebrating it or saying this is something like
No, but
literature that should be studied.
The teacher went on to, I think she's the editor of IO9, the Gawker, like sci-fi, Annalee Newitt. She testified in the obscenity trial, saying that it had literary merit.
Hey, you're skipping ahead. We'll get to that. We have only scratched the surface.
I'm still getting beaten. Okay.
Yeah, we're still
haven't hit back yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Huh, boy. So a lot of people don't know, who are listening, that you are also a great writer.
Oh, thank you.
And I mean that. And I didn't know that until I started reading you.
So that's what you got to say. Now I start purring, and I'm nice forever. Because a lot of my favorite writer is H.L. Mencken. I've been trying to track down this line of his. Yeah. It was something on the lines of he was criticizing somebody, and nobody could criticize somebody like he did. But he said this person doesn't even have the honor to ponder that maybe his enemies have good intentions too.
Yep.
Like people disagree, don't like me, but at least you don't even have to say I'm a good writer. Say like I'm sincere. That's all you got to say. Like I'm not doing this to shock you or anything.
Yeah, you're a relentless social critic, I would say. Is that fair?
Yeah, because I'm somebody who's just not social at all.
Right.
I think that makes you a better social critic. Once you're in the mix of it, you kind of have conflict of interest.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people would think of you as kind of like Hunter S. Thompson, but I don't. First of all, your prose is much better than his.
Why? Thanks. I always go for Tom Wolfe, and he's underappreciated because he wasn't a fuck up, I guess.
Yeah, no, you have your prose is elegant, and it's the way you also have a podcast, which I'm a big fan of now, even though I disagree with some of it. Oh, there you go. There's your disavowal. I did it. Yeah. 6 minutes in, I did it.
Disavowed already.
God, I hate that. Fuck me for saying that.
You need a siren to go off.
I really do.
For every disavowal.
No, when I read you and listen to you, I get angry at myself because I think, God damn it, why didn't you? Like I was scared of you and people like you. I guess you were kind of on my radar a few years ago, but just like just the markers of who you were, I mean, literally like images, the bald head, and you lived in Stone Mountain, Georgia. I was like, okay, I probably shouldn't read this guy.
Stone Mountain's 88% black.
He'll trauma. I thought that was like trolling on your part to move to Stone Mountain because that's the birthplace of the clan.
I'm working class. It's cheap.
I know. And we'll get to your living situation in a minute too, which is also hilarious. But you raise questions and you make arguments and you use evidence. You make arguments that aren't really allowed in universities, in most of the media. And so I was shielded from them for most of my life. And even now, when I've been exposed to some of those arguments recently, now when I read you, there's new stuff I get from you that I haven't. It forces me to think through things like race and immigration and gender and sexuality and all these things. It's withering. It's like you write with acid. It's like I feel like you're throwing acid.
Yeah.
Sort of, just flicking it on this, that, and the other thing, right? And it just burns things down to the core so you can see what's really going on.
People get disappointed sometimes because I'm not a dick, like when they meet me, and they think I must be posing, but that anger is all legitimate. But I like to, like the 1-inch kung fu punch, you kind of channel it into that.
Yeah,
but it's legitimate. Yeah. But as far as like even getting to talk, the Redneck Manifesto came out in 1997. I was put on radio for like one day. I think the biggest thing I was on was Michael Savage, but they did no publicity otherwise. And I never got a chance to defend the book. I was on Bill Maher, but I was stricken with grief. My first wife was dying of cancer and my head wasn't there. And again, not being a dick, everyone else, Heavy D, Michael Rappaport, Karen, they're all screaming over me. So I just shut up. Like that's just not my style.
Yeah, the other thing we have in common is that we were both published by Simon & Schuster. That's my second book.
Who published the liberal Redneck Manifesto a year or two ago. Have you seen this thing?
Oh, yes. White trash.
It's dragging Dixie out of the dark. My name's Trey Crowder. I'm from bumfuck Tennessee. Goddamn Hillary Clinton, transgender bathrooms. It's basically, he's like
you're talking about
he's doing a minstrel show.
You're talking about what's his face, yeah.
There's 3 guys. Trey Crowder and 2 other comedians or alleged comedians. And
there's been many books on white trash and rednecks.
There was Nancy Eisenberg did White Trash, a history.
The history of it, that's what I'm talking about.
J.D. Vance did Hillbilly Elegy. And there were books before him. I mean, God, W.J. Cash, the only book he ever wrote was The Mind of the South. That was the 1940s. And there was a book about movies called Hillbilly Land that was before that.
So here's the third thing you and I have in common. At least 10 to 15 years ago, I had never heard of you at that point. I thought that my next book was going to be called The Uses of the Redneck.
Okay.
Because I saw all around me in my world liberals at Columbia University, Manhattan, Berkeley, San Francisco saying, look down there, see, that's the other, that's the bad thing. We're not like them, we're superior to them. And this proves that we're right because they are bad in these ways.
Well, I came from it like
that they were essential. Rednecks are essential in liberal identity formation.
And it's this age-old struggle of good whites versus bad whites, with the rednecks being the bad whites. And one of the premises of that book was, if you play odds, I mean, I flew into Vegas for this trip to L.A., rich whites are much more likely to be descended from slave owners, and poor whites in America much more likely to be descended from convict laborers, indentured servants. And I always tell this story because I think it's fascinating. My brother, Johnny, who's still alive, he's 13 years older than me. He tried to go to college in the 60s. We came from this brick home, Irish Catholic. He was still a greaser. Him and his buddies used to beat up Todd Rundgren. He lived like a mile away from us. And they called him a geeky boy. They called any Beatles fans or British Invasion types geeky boys, and they were the greasers. They go around and fuck them up. But he tried to go to college at Temple University in '67. He was just overwhelmed, like everyone's a hippie. Mm-hmm. He enlisted. He went the other direction. To go
to Vietnam.
He was a college dodger.
Instead of going to college. And that's been my experience too, because I straddled 2 worlds, because I never fit in with those kids in that neighborhood. Yeah. I was just too weird. I was bookworm and the spelling bee champ and all that shit. But then I get into this other world, and that's just part of my beef is, and what I concluded was like, the creative classes aren't necessarily the most creative people. The people with the time to develop one of these half-assed creative careers. Indeed.
Working class, pretty much, you hit the ground running and have to support yourself.
You find that out when you go to graduate school.
Yeah.
And you find out that half your classmates, this was my experience, were the descendants of the Montgomery Ward dynasty, or the Goldman Sachs dynasty, or they were almost all rich kids. Sure.
And it was living here. I worked for the LA Reader, and what's your profanity or wigger is okay to use?
Oh yeah, my son is a wigger, as a lot of people know.
I was the world's first wigger and world's first ex-wigger.
I think I was the second one.
We're talking 82, driving my cab, listening to Grandmaster Flash.
That's when I turned. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they had a receptionist from Compton, and boy, this receptionist was from Compton.
Mm-hmm.
But I was the only one that talked to her and related to her. And but I started realizing this was back when Sting and Peter Gabriel were big, and they were playing rainforest concerts, and everyone was crying over the Amazon Indians. But if a bunch of hillbillies in Riverside all got cancer because they lived on a toxic waste dump, it was hilarious. They deserved it. Well, we just have with this Vegas shooting. Oh, they were gun-toting Republicans. I don't feel any sympathy. And I just started to wonder why. And I started thinking back, my mom was from Philly, but one of 11 kids. They were a poor family. My dad was from buttfuck Vermont, Windsor, Vermont, where there was a Goodyear plant. And I remember I internalized this. For my high school senior class, English class, my presentation, because I'd been there in the summer of 78. It was the last time in Vermont. And I just made fun of my dad's side of the family, called them the Goad clan, and made them like they were Little Abner, the Beverly Hillbillies. So I actually, I kind of took that shame and presented it to the class. Okay, I'm supposed to be ashamed of this. But after a while, a lot of these people, like my Uncle Junie, my dad was brutal, but he was the youngest of the 4 boys. This guy was like Will Rogers, such a great person. And my Aunt Marion, again, didn't get along with my parents. I would have swapped them out for this aunt and uncle easily. Aunt Marion, she just died a couple of years ago, 90. Female Don Rickles. Just incredibly quick timing. She was 85, making us sandwiches in Southwest Philly. The neighborhood had turned all black. And she's just talking and riffing and everything. And then the doorbell rings. She says, "Oh, that's my black boyfriend. I'll be right back." Like an 85-year-old fat Irish white woman. She's hysterical. But, these are the people that people in media and entertainment shit on. And it's well, hey, that's where I come from. I never claimed to be a Southerner. But when I was researching the Redneck book, in Canada, they call it everyone who's not, in British Columbia or Ontario rednecks. Everyone in Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's a term, and there's that type across the world. In Japan, there's the hairy Ainu, these indigenous people who live in the hills. What are they, Yobs in Australia? Yeah. There's a redneck type everywhere, and even the word pagan in Latin comes from pagus, country, or heathen is someone out in the heath. They're ancient analogs to hillbillies.
Here's a number. I'm not even sure you know this. Right now, as we speak, there are about 500,000 white people in prison in this country. Does anyone know this? No. Does anyone care? No. Do you read news stories about mass incarceration among whites? I think most Americans are not aware that there's a single white person in prison now.
You wouldn't know. You wouldn't even know there's a
Why would you know? It's never mentioned.
The only place there are white people is in the South, which is hilarious to me because it's the blackest part of the country and always has been.
So I got into a little Twitter argument, because that's how I waste my time, with a professor who's infamous, George Cicciarello Maher. In fact, he was just suspended by Drexel.
Oh, that's the guy who was applauding white genocide.
Correct. And he said something about how Trump was responsible for the Vegas shooting. Anyway, but it was about mass incarceration, and he said something about how it's all because of racism. And I said, well, that's interesting, because about 500,000 white people are in prison right now. How do you account for that? And he said, oh, well, that was just collateral damage.
What do you even say to someone
that? It was a racist conspiracy to put black people. This is the common argument, not just claim. It's an argument. Many, many books have been written making this argument that the whole thing's a racist conspiracy, and that white people, yes, they were accidentally rounded up as sort of a collateral damage, right? We sent the bombs into the village, and there were some civilians who were taken out. But it's really about racism. And it's a hell of a lot of collateral damage. That's a lot of caging your own people if you are interested in killing the other.
Based on white supremacy, why aren't Asians in prison similar rates to blacks? Why aren't they even in prison in similar rates compared to whites? Yeah. Might be related to offending rates. Asians have lower crime rates than whites do, typically. I don't even know if you want to go here, but typically score better on intelligence tests.
Yeah, I do want to go there. Maybe not right now,
Per capita income.
Because we're just warming people up here. So.
Yeah, you don't want to disavowing left and right.
Yeah, no, I do want to go there.
Off.
I don't think let's just do it now.
Okay.
Who cares?
I used to be a liberal, but I just figured there were some things that race, this evil demon, that's a childish notion at this point. I don't think it explains everything.
Well,
I'm not a pure geneticist, everything's genetics, but I think so much of the left, that's all, they won't dare allow for anything to be genetic, unless it's white people looking bad genetically somehow. You're prone to autism or...
Okay, let's do
spree killing.
Let's do IQ in the following way. Okay. So you're Irish Catholic, correct?
I sent my spit off to 23andMe. I was always told Irish and French. My paternal grandmother was Isla Ducharme from. They were from like northern Vermont, the Canadian border.
Okay.
23andMe says like 75% English and Irish, like 5% French and German, but like 99.8% Northern European overall. So I'm white.
Oh.
You might get Bjork. Bjork might be whiter than me.
I thought you said Irish. You had an Irish somebody.
23andMe does not differentiate between English and Irish, which is confusing because I think there's Celtic and Anglo-Saxon. But
okay, so the Philly Irish. So you're from Philadelphia.
Yeah, no one identified as English. It was Irish and Italian in our neighborhood.
Okay,
that was it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're from a South Philly suburb, basically.
Southwestern, Clifton Heights.
Okay, which was working class, we would call it.
Yeah, still is.
Right.
Yeah, I go back every once in a while. I was there over the winter.
So I'm sure you're aware of Noel Ignatieff then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Mr. Abolish the White Race.
Well, yeah, that's his stupid argument. I think the argument he makes that's better is, how the Irish became white. And so he shows, I don't think he just argues, I think he does a pretty good job of it, shows that, the Irish were considered to be either like blacks or actually black or
worse,
chimpanzees,
right.
not human. Certainly not white, right? And that for good reason, actually, because Irish committed crimes at an incredibly high rate. They ran all the worst street gangs in Philadelphia and New York at the time.
Yes.
They were really into dancing and really not into working. They were really into drinking, especially on the job. And when they were digging the canals connecting the Atlantic to the Great Lakes, they sometimes would blow up the canals when they felt like taking a day off. So their IQ was probably pretty low. We didn't have the IQ test then.
Yeah, I don't think they even had developed.
But I would imagine, wouldn't you, that if they did take an IQ test, they would have scored pretty low.
It depends. In my neighborhood, yeah. The ones I went to school with, shout out to Holy Cross Elementary School. Hell yeah. I mean, a lot of dummies there. A lot of people. I mean, the story I always tell is I went back there. I'd been away for like 20 years, and I lived out in L.A., and I went back because I went to New York to sign the Redneck book deal. Went to my old neighborhood, and Bobby Millicent, who was a year younger than me, not saying anything bad about, not lumping him in with all these morons in the neighborhood, but not adventurous. His whole move, and the whole time I was gone, I came back, I was in my mid-30s. I'd left in high school. He moved out of his row home, moved next door, and bought the one adjoining his. That was his big leap in life. We're like 5 miles from the Philly border. A lot of these people never been to Philly.
Wow.
It was really provincial and parochial, and that was all they knew. And some of you look on Facebook, some of these people, they've got 80 pounds on them, but nothing has changed. It's the Eagles and the Phillies and going to the shore every weekend, and it's the same. Not adventurous at all.
Right. But now we have lots of Irish people who are professors and journalists and great authors and presidents and senators and all that, right? So it seems to me that the Irish IQ has increased over the last 200 years.
You'd have no way of measuring it, I guess, until when IQ. I'd like to see how they scored when they started. Because didn't Jews used to score poorly?
Yes, Jews were just like your people. And I'm, by the way, I'm part Irish and part Jewish, so I get to just say whatever I want here.
I'm trying to think how that works. So
not well.
You get drunk and then feel guilty? Like how
how did you know?
Well, I'm just combining the traits here.
You nailed me, just like that. Actually, that is very true, actually. Yes, I used to get drunk a lot and feel guilty about it. Now I'm just guilty. I don't drink anymore. No, I stopped drinking, but I just feel guilty.
How long ago?
5 years.
It's been 35 years for me.
I was going to ask you because that's the only thing I didn't see in your resume was drugs and alcohol, but there must have been.
I grew up. I remember my sister spitting blood into the toilet because my dad had beaten her and saying, "This is what your father's all about." Did not have a good impression of him from the start. He was not a pleasant person, and I remember that. and I talked to Gavin about this because Obama
Gavin McInnes, who caused the Charlottesville Nazi rampage.
I think it was him in the car. I think when
it's remote controlled. He was in New York and he had a
drone, a Nazi drone,
car drone. Yeah.
What were we talking about here?
Sorry, drinking.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I hate it. Like he asked me, Obama let out a bunch of prisoners, and there's this. Well, you shouldn't just put violent people in prison. And I don't know. There's people who say that have never been around addicts. I think because my dad beat me, and he was an alcoholic. I would have taken the beatings over the alcoholism. The hate that's been burned into me mostly is having a drunk father who just wasn't there for me at all. Mm-hmm. And I vowed I would never become that. But the thing was, I grew up. I graduated high school in '79. Up until Animal House in '78, drinking was considered like what people who listen to Frank Sinatra did. Mm-hmm. It was considered uncool. Animal House came along, and then there were keg parties, toga parties. So I started drinking, and I was like Ray Milland in The Lost Weekend within 2 years. The last 2 days I drank, I renewed TV Guide subscriptions over the phone. I drank 3/4 of a gallon of wine and went in and was perfectly functional. Next day, I took off from community college, drank a whole bottle of Colt 45 and a whole bottle of tequila that was so cheap the cap was a red sombrero that you screw off. Got into a fist fight with 2 cops that I don't remember, woke up with my face all fucked up in jail, being charged with assaulting 2 police officers, and said, now's the time to stop. Because, it was one situation where I would wake up, I'd look outside, the radiator's on the outside of the car now. Like, how'd that, and like black out all the time. Yeah. I'd be dead or somebody would be dead if I
So you were drinking. Like early 20s?
I was 20. I never drank legally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And but it's not this accomplishment. I've never been tempted. I could be in a bar, people drink. I'm not tempted at all. But I know that if I drank, I'd be right back where I was. I know that instinctually.
Quick side note that you just made me think about. Right? I'm remembering that drinking used to be uncool. Yeah. It was about weed, right? Smoking weed. That was
everything.
Cool.
Quaaludes were
drugs
fantastic.
were good. Yeah.
I've done every drug I ever had the chance of doing. I've done heroin twice, snorted it twice. Not really impressed with them. My favorite were the hallucinogens, and weed is still the thing that I do. After brain surgery, I'm not going to try like ketamine or angel dust.
And you had brain surgery, and we haven't even talked about some of this. Okay,
yeah, it's quite a story. But drugs,
man.
As long as you don't fuck up people around you, and there are a lot of people, they don't party. They're running from something.
Oh, you said something about prison and drug takers, and what was that point?
The idea that we should let out all the addicts or drug peddlers or drug possessors and keep violent people in there. I think one day we'll be far enough along with neurology. We'll get to the roots of violence. And I think it's inescapable. If you were exposed to violence early on, you'll become violent, or you'll be at least shell shocked or PTSD or trigger happy. And but I think, in my life, the people that have infuriated me more were drunks and pillheads, non-violent. You just punch them back if they're violent.
Drunks are the worst.
That's not a big, drunks especially. I toured with Hank Williams III, singing. I sing country music as a joke, but he took it seriously, so I went on tour. That was torture, because 3/4 of his songs are about drinking, and everyone in the crowd's drunk. Everyone in my band was fucking drunk. It was my idea of hell.
So wait, you want drug addicts to be in prison or not?
No, I think incarceration is barbaric. I think one day people will look back at it like slavery. What the fuck were we thinking? You take somebody who's probably messed up in the head in the first place, put him in a cage and treat him like an animal and let him out and expect him to act better? That's just counterintuitive. I'm pretty clueless psychologically, but I understand that that's bad psychology.
So your position on prisons is the same as Angela Davis's.
She says just abolish them?
You're an abolitionist.
I think I'm probably as totalitarian as this is, and I'm very suspicious of government. I think more Clockwork Orange sort of.
Okay.
Get to the.
This is not Angela Davis's position. Okay.
Well, just see what what makes somebody violent neurologically. I think a lot of times these people have head injuries, stuff like that, and they're not. I found after I got out, because I had I'm epileptic.
You just slipped that in. People don't know that you were in prison. We'll get there too.
We can splice all this. I was born epileptic. I used to have night seizures as a kid all the time.
Wow.
But after I took a plea, I told my lawyer I'm epileptic. She said, "Why didn't you tell me that?" I'm like, "Well, you didn't ask. Why would I tell you that?" She's like, "I could have gotten you off just on that alone." But I also had a brain tumor that was there at the time. I would have never gone to jail if any of this had been known. So that's just Goad luck. I mean, if they're too bad at one option's the worst, that's the one that's going to happen to me.
Okay, so now the audience knows some things about you. And what I want to do is try to bring some structure to this, biographical structure. Okay, so we got you born and raised in a working class Philly suburb, violent parents, beaten from before you were born through your childhood until you were 16 by them. Mm-hmm. Brother enlists in the army
to get away
to
from
go
college.
to Vietnam instead of going to college. Your other brother, half-brother, gets killed?
No, these were all biological. I think I was a mistake because they were 17, 13, and 12 years older than me.
That's not the typical biography of a professional writer.
Yeah.
Which is what you are. And you're a good one. And I mean that. And it's your prose. I should say this, but
come on.
No,
I get enough shit.
Well, no, I'm gonna praise you by praising myself. No, it does. You have a clarity that I really admire, and it's elegant is really the word, and it's funny because the way you present, even people can hear it now. Like you have a podcast, and it's in the way you speak as well. There's an elegance to your presentation, which is so funny because your reputation and your biography is that of a barbarian.
Yeah.
Right? A cave person.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and it's just the opposite in your presentation. So that's
Hitler and Ike Turner mixed with a cave person.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, Hitler, no.
I met Ike Turner. What a sweet man.
Did you?
He's like 5'2".
Is he really?
Yeah.
It was?
It was, yeah. It was at the Portland Blues Festival around 2000, and he was signing CDs afterward. Like 5'2" and just one of the most warm, gentle smiles I'd ever seen. Huh. Yeah.
Well,
but and the guy pretty much invented rock and roll. I mean, he, probably more than anyone. Maybe Bo Diddley's neck and neck with him.
He's right there.
But that's all he's remembered.
What about Little Richard? I thought he was...
Little Richard's my favorite all-time musician.
He's the greatest human being who's ever lived. Greatest American.
That's. I mean, I don't get fanish much, but I got his phone number. He was staying at a penthouse suite on the Sunset Strip, and I called him. I wanted to do an interview with him, and I talked to him for I'd like to speak to the king of rock and roll. Who's this?
What?
I told him. He's like, well, thank you. Here's my agent, and that was enough for me. But
you got him on the phone though.
Got Little Richard.
He answered his own phone.
He answered the penthouse suite at the Hyatt Sunset or whatever it was.
Okay, I said we were going to bring structure to this, but I'm not going to do that. So no, because I need to tell you the story. I don't know if you know this. You might know this. Have you read the biographies of Little Richard?
I read one a long time ago. Made him very religious, religious one day and gay the next day and back and forth.
Yeah, the fact that there hasn't been a biopic movie of him is astonishing to me because, my God. So there's this great sort of scene in one of his biographies in which he's in Macon, Georgia, which is where he was from, in the 1940s. So segregated South. Here is Little Richard, black man, dressed in a sundress and a bonnet with a parasol and two other queens walking down the street, downtown Macon, Georgia, singing at the top of their lungs, and no one cares. It's an incredible, it's like everything that I think is heroic.
I always say this, I've never seen races get along better than they do down south.
Oh, yeah.
It blows people's minds, but it makes sense. They've lived there longer. Despite the history, blacks in large numbers didn't move out of the South till after World War II.
I've spent a fair amount of time in the South, a lot in Savannah, Georgia, and I've traveled around the South doing research and other things, New Orleans, across Alabama. And what I noticed immediately was whenever I went into a restaurant or any public space, I would see blacks and whites sitting together.
Yeah.
Which I didn't see in New York City. And I thought...
You see it in prison, too. That's like the only other place.
Yeah. I'm so glad you like Little Richard.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Eddie Cochran's probably my favorite Caucasian musician. I just think the first wave of rock and roll. And I'll plug it here. I get nothing out of this on WMBR in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Saturday mornings, 10 to 12 noon Eastern time. It's a show called Backwoods. Greatest. It's roots music. And you listen to this, you realize the first wave of rock and roll was the greatest. The Beatles ruined everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just so truly revolutionary in so many ways. But the way that they transgressed racial boundaries was really stunning.
Probably more than anything in hip-hop, too. You could take all the academic...
Well, you have all these white girls in Birmingham, Alabama rushing the stage to touch Chuck Berry.
Right.
And then sleep with him.
And get peed on him and have it videotaped.
That's why the Klan went crazy and tried to kill him. That's why
That's why he started taping his encounters, because he got white slavery charges, like transporting people across.
And he did jail time because of it. Yeah.
Well, he did jail time because I'm not sure if he did jail time, but he had a restaurant in St. Louis where he drilled holes into the women's bathroom and videotaped them peeing. He had
I didn't know about that.
Severe, but he would also
Nobody's perfect.
tape his one night stands to establish consent.
Right.
But he would pee all over these chicks.
Right.
That was his deal.
I didn't know about that. Yeah.
He got into trouble for the surreptitious cameras and the.
But the desire was mostly from the white girls toward him, right? And that's what drove people nuts.
I'm sure that it was race music. So they had Pat Boone do the records for the white kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think on early Saturday Night Live they were the five Caucasians. It was Gilda Radner and John Belushi. They were.
Oh yeah.
It was Ray Charles was the guest host, so they're doing What I Say, and they've all got sweaters on. They're all collegiate.
Okay, so you wanted to be an actor originally?
Yeah. I auditioned at New York University as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. And got accepted and was going to study with Stella Adler, and my parents said no, that's a fag's profession, and so I gave it up and drove a cab. Yeah, but I mean, if you're not, the opportunities are endless. that was what I found. I mean, I was St. Francis in again one of these crazy, wacky Jesus musicals of the '70s. It was a local thing in Philly called Francis with an exclamation point, and I was St. Francis, and I did it at Archbishop Halloran High School, which is an all-girls high school. And this is what a dog I was in my teens. I had my phone number put up on business cards, and I'm St. Francis. There's one musical number. I'm out in the crowd singing about the animals or something. And Jim Goad, MA 68206, Jim Goad, Madison 68206, just handing out, trying to mac on these Catholic girls.
So you gave it up because it's a fag's profession.
There was no future, and but also
also true.
Huge Seinfeld fan, which blows everyone's minds. They never expect that from me. But when they're doing the show within a show, the Jerry sitcom, and he's got this crazy female actress doing Elaine, like she won't even answer unless it's like he calls her Elaine, and so you're mad at me. He's like, what? And she's, you're mad. You don't want to talk. We're breaking up. Oh, it's character. Actors are like that. They're nuts. They're people who pretend they're someone else their whole lives. And then I don't think I could handle the neurosis. A writer, at least, you just hang out with yourself.
I don't think I've ever met an actress. I've lived in LA for 9 years. I don't think I've met an actress or actor who's not pretty difficult.
Yeah, I guess
in
it
that
has
way.
to come with it. You have to pretend these are fantasy people. Yeah, so what do they know about? That's why it's always hilarious. They're in politics. Like, what do you know about like tying your shoes?
Yeah, don't get me started on Hollywood people
Right.
and politics. But anyway, so then you wanted to be a writer because that's a better profession?
I wanted to be, this is how mundane it was. I wanted to be a rock critic. I read Rolling Stone and wanted to write record reviews.
When Rolling Stone
And
was
went
good.
to journalism school, got accepted there. Again, just didn't do my research. With my SATs, I could have gotten a 4-year scholarship to Temple University. Instead, I went to community college for 2 years, got student loans, and went to Temple for the final 2 years.
Sounds like you might have had a high IQ.
I was tested pretty high when I was a kid, yeah. And that was, they thought I was going to be president. I was sort of a prodigy. And I remember my brother told me that a psychiatrist told the family he's going to have a lot of trouble in life because he's too smart.
Huh. I don't know my IQ. I still don't know it. I don't think it would be very high.
No, why not?
Because, well, here's the other piece of the argument against you, which is that it tests, as I understand it, mathematical abilities. The ability to do mathematical analysis.
I did better on math than verbal in my SATs.
I can't, if you told me your phone number right now, I would forget it in 5 seconds.
I've smoked enough weed that I'd probably forget it. And I think when I was 12, I would have.
I mean, long division is still a challenge to me.
Yeah, I've never got to calculus. That was never a requirement. But
not even possible for me. So you went to J school at Temple?
Temple University, which they told us was the 6th best journalism school in the country, and there were 4 specialties: newspaper, magazine, broadcasting, and I forget what the other.
Were there more than 6 journalism schools in the country?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, that could have just been some bullshit they fed us.
I don't think there were.
But the teacher selected me the outstanding student when I graduated, and I graduated. I didn't write a word for 3 years. I moved to New York, became a proofreader in a type shop. And then they moved me up to typesetting. Before they had desktop publishing, these massive submarine-sized machines, like with a DOS interface, and you had to run the row paper through photographical chemicals and everything. And
I remember.
But that's how I learned how to do publishing. Answer Me was done through these Verityper machines, the first 3 issues, and then like in '94, I broke down and bought a Mac and did on a Mac Quadra the 4th issue.
So you moved to New York. And
didn't even try to write for 3 years.
Right. Is that when you met your wife?
at a Johnny Thunders concert. He was the guitar player for the New York Dolls. Yeah. And
Debbie.
Yes, the most negative person who ever lived.
Oh.
Which, I mean, very charming, except daily for 12 years. Like extremely, people were just bedazzled.
Wouldn't you
by
be the
him.
second most negative?
I think, but my friend calls me the Iron Marshmallow. There's a whole side to me that people don't get to see that's nauseatingly positive.
No, I know.
No, trust me, no one wants to see.
Yeah, I was 50% joking when I said that.
Yeah.
And that's a relationship we'll talk about. So Rolling Stone was your inspiration. This is when Rolling Stone was actually saying things that were interesting.
I don't even know if they ever did, but I thought being a rock critic was a noble thing to be, and rather than being a parasite, basically, somebody who can't do, so they teach or they criticize. But I guess, I was trained in journalism, and it appealed to me, just the idea that you don't put yourself into it. You treat it like a science.
Were you interested in politics then, too? Or just rock?
Just rock. I was politically clueless.
Oh, really?
It's amazing how I can turn faucets off on stuff, because I was, like I said, I did better in math than verbal and SATs, and I was Mr. Science as a kid. Around age 13, I had these weird fanatical phases. I was a Marx Brothers lunatic for a couple of years. That's all I thought about in scrapbooks and contacting Groucho's mistress and Harpo's wife for autographs and everything. Then I became a hardcore Christian. I mean, I did the hell out of it.
Okay, I did not know this.
Oh, yeah. Because I was raised Catholic, and, that's the environment you're raised. You believe it's true. You believe there's a heaven and a hell. But most of these people aren't fanatical about it. But there was a nun in freshman year of high school, Cardinal O'Hara in Broomall, Pennsylvania, and she was talking about Our Lady of Fatima, who was this blimp-sized Virgin Mary who appeared to these shepherd children in Portugal, and then eventually crowds, 90,000 people, and these apocalyptic visions. She's talking about hell, and her, she's looking down into the lake of fire. And I'm like, well, sounds kind of scary. For Easter, freshman year, I started reading the Bible. It's like, oh, fuck, I better get in line, because it makes pretty explicit. It's not even open to interpretation. You have to be a fanatic, give up everything in the world. So I did. I mean, I did the hell. I don't eat it. There was a Church of the Subgenius. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, in San Francisco.
I think they were Texas, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, with the Bob, with the tobacco pipe.
Oh, yeah, I'm confusing them with another. Okay, yes, I do.
One of his mottos was, don't eat a hamburger, eat the hell out of it. And that's what I did with Christianity. Even the nuns thought I was too extreme.
So this was high school?
This was high school, and the problem was I kept reading enough of the Bible where I found that, Matthew 26:28 and Romans 10:13 can't be true together. They're direct. Or why in Leviticus is he saying this is an eternal law, and then Jesus comes along and says, no, we're revoking that. Did God not know it was eternal law? But did he lie? He wouldn't be God under anything. So my faith started crumbling, and then it was around Halloween. I went to these prayer meetings. There was something in the 70s called the Catholic Charismatic Renewal, because the Catholic Church liked to have a lockdown on the sacraments, but these people claimed they were recreating the Pentecost. You could speak in tongues, and my faith wasn't that strong. I never fooled myself into pretending I was speaking Aramaic or anything, but I used to hitchhike to these prayer meetings, and it was in a cemetery in this building, craggedy. It was October, so they'd lost all the leaves, and it was Sleepy Hollow. But I was hitchhiking there, and these dudes in a Chevelle pull up, and I could smell weed, and oh, you want the Blue Oyster Cult or the Jethro Tull 8-track? And I'm trying to be cool. I'm like, Tull. And they passed the ball around. I took a couple hits. And I got out, and I looked up at the moon, and there was this beautiful nimbus around it, and I'm like, this is a religious experience. My consciousness, this is like dreaming. This is everything I've been going for in the prayer meetings, but here it is. And that's a drug I never had problems with, except finding or affording. I mean, I guess they just decriminalized the possession of an ounce or less in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, with all the scare stories I heard about weed, I remember my mom telling a friend's mom, he's on pot now. I was on the pot. The monkey was on my back already.
I was terrified of it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I was terrified of all things, pretty much, when I was in high school as a teenager. Drugs, drinking, scary people like you. I was scared of heavy metal bands. I remember that. I remember Kiss being really terrifying to me. There was like some scare article in Newsweek, I think, about KISS in the late 70s.
My mom thought it was an acronym for Kids in Satan's Service.
And I was just like, oh my God, this is really like they have blood and, biting off the heads of animals and long tongues. And this is really, I remember just being really, really scared. I remember being scared of the Grateful Dead because of the T-shirts with the skull, right?
Yes.
And I was like, that's a devil thing or something. And so I didn't go there for a long, long time.
It was an extreme name. I remember also hearing, you got to listen to Dark Star on acid, man. Like, because I didn't understand why this is just like this really shitty West Coast bluegrass band, as far as I could tell.
Right.
I dropped window pane acid, listen to Dark Star, and I still don't get it. I don't know what you guys are talking about. But at drugs, I remember watching Bewitched and Tabitha, like she went into some spell or something. I was entranced. I wanted to get tonsillitis, so they gave me laughing gas. I was fascinated with drugs, like at 6 years old. And they made it appealing. There was an ABC TV movie called Go Ask Alice. It was based on some novel that I guess was based on the Jefferson Airplane song. And every drug she did is like, wow, and you see pink unicorns dancing? Hell yeah. I mean, that was definitely break out of the mold of my dreary brick row home existence.
Yeah, I mean, hallucinogenics, I think I've always hated them, and it's interesting because I think of them as sort of intellectual drugs.
Yeah.
They appeal to cerebral types.
The thing that never gets talked about is how funny everything is.
Yeah.
You laugh your ass off.
For the first 30 minutes, everything was hilarious. Yeah. And then the next 8 hours was hell.
I remember being on mushrooms in Portland and just the little 3-prong socket. It looked like Mr. Bill from Saturday Night Live, just this little like happy face. That was the funniest thing. It's not funny now, but when you're on mushrooms, that's the funniest thing in the world. You'll laugh for 2 hours about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you start Answer Me in New York?
No, L.A.
Okay, so...
I went to college in Philly, graduated 85, moved up late 85 to New York City, got a job as a proofreader at night. Actually, I didn't write for 3 years. I got the typesetting skills, took them out to L.A., was still working as a typesetter.
This is like late 80s?
Yeah, this would be like late 80s. And I was a big hip-hop fan.
I was going to say, so what was your... You present as a punk rock guy? But
just because of the shaved head and just because of this giant great white shark-sized scar from brain surgery.
Well, there's that, but there's also...
plus, it was thinning and graying, and it's like just get it...
yeah.
And plus it's the texture of pubic hair.
I know all about it, yeah.
Comb it.
No, your sensibility is I relate it to early punk rock, the kind of the unrelenting anger, the unrelenting social criticism, there's actually, sort of masculine, but in your case, you don't actually present as masculine, but there is in that way.
I think you just got a dirty look from them.
In that way, in the bad way. Okay. I'm just thinking of Henry Rollins, who you're very much not like in a lot of ways, but there's sort of there's a type. I was on Henry's show, and I was horrified by, he's very nice to me, but horrified by his cultural politics. He's basically like a Christian conservative without the Christianity. I mean, it's all about like work hard and be in a family and don't drink and just work all the time.
Okay.
But anyway, there's that kind of aggression, and also the kind of like fuck everybody attitude.
That's what appealed to me about punk rock. I did a whole podcast episode about this. When it came out, the first time I heard of it, was when I was a Christian. I was down in Florida at my brother's house. It was when Pong first came out for TV.
Yep.
And it was parade. It was 60 Minutes did something about the British working class is eviscerated, and they're turning to this weird music.
So this would be late 70s.
This would be like 76,
like
77.
Sex Pistols.
And I remember seeing the Sex Pistols in Parade magazine. I was still a Christian, and it's got the sex, who all look, degenerates, and then you've got a midget, and I'm like, this is the worst, most horrible thing. Mm-hmm. And, obviously the world's ending, and you would get beaten up back then. I was like the only one who fought back in that crowd. I kind of became the enforcer for the punk and new wave guys where I was from. But it was just considered, but now, teachers have mohawks and piercings.
Oh, sure.
And it's been mainstream, but it got, first it was, what appealed to me was sociopathic. There was, even people who seem really benign now, like Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
You listen to his lyrics, he's stalking some chick.
Yeah.
Like he's upset, like he's going to kill her. Like this year's Model album, which is a great album. I think it's better than any punk album ever made.
Oh, yeah.
That's all about one girl, and I would get a restraining order if I was that girl. Or Talking Heads' Psycho Killer. Like who did songs about serial killers?
Oh, yeah.
And they're just these preppy Rhode Island school of design kids.
Yeah.
But there was something that was like not sociable or definitely not socialistic. But then you had The Clash and all of a sudden Crass, and it got highly politicized, and just everyone's totally. Back then, it was just be a freak. Now it's like, well, be a freak. Here's the handbook. If you deviate, you're out.
Yeah, I was never really into punk. I didn't like it. I appreciated it and I respected it. Early punk, I mean. The thing I didn't like about it was that there didn't seem to be a lot of pleasure in it. Like, I was always attracted to black music because I was into dancing and into beats and rhythm and all that stuff, sort of the sensual part of it. To me, there was no sensuality, sort of anti-sensual punk rock, right? Until I said this to a guest on this show, actually, who's a gay porn star, and he said, no, the punk guys were the hottest dudes. Like, the masculinity, all that aggression he found to be a complete turn on.
I don't see much difference between the 70s punk and like late 70s disco nihilism. To me, all that was drugs and sex and blotting out your pain through both of them.
Yeah.
I mentioned Looking for Mr. Goodbar. We watched that like a few months ago.
No, but
it's like the most dark movie Hollywood ever made.
But punk wasn't about sex, was it?
Well, I mean, for a while there, the unofficial anthem was "Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll" by Ian Dury. He was a kind of a guy with one and a half arms.
To me, it was about violence.
Some of it was, yeah, definitely.
Some of which I applaud. I mean, some of it I approve of, but it's that kind of angry attitude, the destroy attitude, which is fine with me. But
things you never hear of, like pogoing. People don't even remember that, or spitting on the audience.
I do.
Or safety pins in your cheek,
and the mosh pit. Like that's violence. It's just a melee there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But that's all been policed out of it, and they're all. And it's like, and I, in the episode, I said what ruined it was hardcore. Because
hardcore was the worst thing ever.
The first time I heard a Circle Jerks record, I'm like, oh, this sounds like a shitty Clash record from 3 years ago. But
I kept waiting for me to hear the music or to hear something. It was almost like a conspiracy, right? That people pretended that this was great and they would actually sit down and listen to
it. So then it wasn't real punk unless you couldn't play.
Yeah.
And if you went past 3 chords or added some texture like the horn or something like. And it just became this fundamentalism. Because like when I first started out, there was all kinds of, the Stranglers were, I mean, you can't classify their music as punk now.
Flipper.
I actually have a good Flipper story.
At least they were funny.
We went to, they used to have, that movie Altered States was big in the early 80s. It was based loosely on John Lilly, who would shoot up ketamine and hang out with dolphins underwater. But it was William Hurt in a flotation, tanks tripping out. So we did some window pane acid and drank 6-pack each, and we went to these flotation tanks in it's like South Street in Philly, and we were all blissed out. And the hardcore shows were at the Elks Center, and so let's go see Flipper's playing at the Elks Center. So we're all just floating over to South Philly, and we didn't even go in, but the doors were open, and you could see them. They were. They would like play 6 songs, but for 4 hours. They just like grinding it, and they were hauling one broken body after the people were just getting pissed off because they were playing so slow and beating the shit out of each other. That was quite a good counterpoint. We're all like Gandhi. All of a sudden, we're just watching like injured people being taken out of a Flipper concert, but it never went anywhere. It became like this fundamentalist thing. Like I said, it's not false, it's not real punk. It's like, all right, then I'm done. And it was, and as juvenile as this was, I heard about Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5. And when you're hormonal and you're in your late teens, it's like whatever band can beat the shit out of the other band is the coolest and most musically accomplished band. And I figured Grandmaster Flash would wipe the floor with Black Flag, and that was it.
Being from the South Bronx,
but plus it was a new format. Punk rock was just stripped down rock and roll.
Right.
Hip hop they were doing something totally different. They were taking little snippets of records and making that the record and rhyming over it. That just wasn't done.
So again, this is sort of the early days of hip hop. This is late 70s. You're talking about when you got turned on to.
I was hitchhiking. I heard Rapper's Delight. It had been like 79. I'm like, this is the worst piece of shit ever. I bust you out, my super sperm. Go do it. I'm like, this is horrible. But that song sold as much as Blue Suede Shoes. It's like 6 million worldwide.
Oh yeah.
But it was when the message came out with Grandmaster and people started taking it seriously. That I started listening to them. Like, this is. Because there were. I was into, God, somebody's going to shoot me for this, but I liked the Velvet Underground just for the noise, like what John Cale brought to it. And I thought they were like a shitty folk band after he left, or the New York band Suicide, or even like the Donna Summer song "I Feel Love," when there's this drone hypnotic that takes you in, and a lot of that early hip hop was that like electronic, like Africa Bambaataa, Planet Rock, 15 minutes, and you're like hypnotized by the end of it. But that didn't go anywhere either. What I liked about hip hop at first was half of their lyrics was about how great their lyrics were, and they tried to write better lyrics. They don't give a shit about the lyrics anymore.
I know. Hip hop now, which is what my son listens to, is I just feel like this is the first time I've really felt like the old man.
Right.
It's like this is not good music. I don't believe there's any such thing as objectively good or bad music,
right.
Except in this case.
That's like chanting. The thing that appealed to me, I saw there was the New York Rocker was this music magazine, and because this was back when you look at a circle jerk song lyrics, you could fit it on a cookie cutter. And then that's the whole song. Mm-hmm. But they had the lyrics to the message, and it's like 6 pages. So I guess as a writer, that appealed to me.
So, but you said you became a Wigger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was down with the black experience throughout most of the 80s.
Well, you were Irish, so Philly Irish.
Yeah, but I mean,
there's a lineage. You have a black lineage.
Could be.
Just
could
saying.
be. I'm not according to my DNA. I think that. Then there's some people say they throw in 1,000th or less Ashkenaz.
Well, Jim, we're all really from Africa. Okay.
Some of us had the sense to move the hell out. Though that's you could. I found out recently, because sub-Saharan Africans are the only ones without Neanderthal DNA. Neanderthal DNA is older, so they might be the because I would always laugh when the Nation of Islam were the original man. I'm like, that's what Darwin said too. You might not want to follow that to its logical conclusion, but apparently like Neanderthals is the oldest DNA. So, and I have according to 23andMe, I have abnormally high levels of Neanderthal.
Of course you do. Yeah. That's obvious. So why'd you move to LA?
Bunch of things. We went out, got married in Vegas in '87. I had never been to the West Coast, toured San Francisco and LA, and I looked, at rents, which were much cheaper than New York, and they had jobs on the Verityper 6400, typesetting jobs. And I am the biggest screaming baby. You could punch me in the face 100 times, I wouldn't flinch. Under 40 degrees, I'm crying. I'm in a ball. I'm like so effeminate with cold weather. Huh. It's like, LA, let's go the hell out to LA. And we did. And Rodney King happened, and the riots, and Northridge earthquake, the OJ chase. I don't think the Answer Me could have been done anywhere else, because I figured it was going to be Beach Boys and sunshine and everyone's happy. And people warn, I'm like, you're crazy. But I think what's fucked up about LA is hardly anyone's from here. Uh-huh. And Florida is the same way. And that does something to your mind. I remember going back east after like 15 years, and it's like, well, cemeteries. There's some history here. Like, you don't see everything's new out here. Right. But the reason moved to LA, the immediate reason was had been married 2 months. I got a phone call. We had an alarm system set up in our apartment in Brighton Beach. The alarm went off. Debbie had to go out. Turns out that the landlord had rigged an illegal stove with like plastic wiring instead of copper, caused a fire that set the alarm off. He called her stupid, and I beat him up. And he said I used a lead pipe, which is not true. I've been charged with felonies twice in my life. Both times I committed a crime, and both times they embellished. Uh-huh. And so I was facing felony charges. And the lawyer, I said, we want to move to LA anyway. And okay. So I beat that by just moving to LA.
So they didn't try to extradite you?
No, we stayed, and I'd lived in the same house with the guy, which was very tense. I mean, he lived in the basement of the house we were renting.
So wait, they charged you with a felony, but
no, I was arraigned.
Or you committed a felony?
It was a felony because of alleged use of blunt instrument. Yeah, which was not. He was actually holding tools in his hands this whole time.
So wait, was there a case against you? Did they prosecute?
I was in jail for a weekend, and I had to go before a judge.
So how'd you get off?
The lawyer told him he's leaving town, and that was okay.
That was it?
No record, yeah.
You can say that? Well, not anymore, maybe.
Maybe not anymore.
Well, I'm leaving town, so you can't put me in prison
that was
for the
deal.
felony?
That was the deal, yeah.
Okay. God.
I came out to LA and was here 7 years, and it was just, it was Adam Parfrey of Feral House Books who flew me up to Portland in the middle of the winter. It was like February and 37 degrees, shitty rain, everyone's fat. Uh-huh. It's like, wow, reality. After 7 years, there's the eye-bleaching sun.
Wait, don't skip over L.A.
Yeah.
So you moved to Hollywood, right? Not just L.A.
We were in the same apartment, 1737 Whitley Avenue, a half block off of Hollywood Boulevard, right near Fredericks, for 7 years.
Right, just total shithole.
Which I didn't expect. It's just, police choppers in your window every night, glass breaking, screaming, people getting beaten up, robbed.
Yeah, Hollywood is not the Beach Boys. It's still really pretty nasty. But especially then in the 90s. So that's when you started Answer Me.
Answer Me was the immediate thing was started writing again when I got out here. So there was this hiatus where I didn't write anything. Then I wrote a short story. And then I started writing these dumb music reviews of hip-hop records. And I interviewed every rapper in the world. Every one of them was late, except they were all late. The only one who apologized was KRS-One. They were uniformly late. I don't know if this was like,
is this when you heard the term
years
CP time? Was this the first time you heard that
colored
term?
people's cotton picking time, or this was just, my reparations or something, having to wait. Interviewed them all. But there was something that changed with the LA riots, too, because I realized I was still white to these people.
Were you writing, who were you writing for?
Oh, God, BAM, Bay Area Music.
Yeah, I used to read BAM.
Music Connection was some industry paper that I wrote for.
I probably read you.
I wrote for the LA Reader. It was like a weekly.
I'm sure I read you.
Yeah, and the owner's wife owned casinos. I wrote a headline there, and this still sticks in my craw. Big Seinfeld fan, but in 1990, I was an editor, and part of my job was writing headlines for other people's reviews. This guy wrote book reviews. One was about a book about coffee tables, and one was about cloth. My headline was Cloth Coffee Table Books About Cloth and Coffee Tables. I think Seinfeld stole that, consciously or otherwise. Come on, kick down a little bit. Give me $10,000.
So a lot of people won't know about Answer Me or the zine scene. I kind of missed it because I went to this incubator called graduate school right when you moved to LA the same year, 91, is that right?
Moved to LA in late 87.
Oh, sorry. Answer Me started in 91.
Answer Me started in 91.
That's what it was.
And one issue every year for 4 years.
Yeah. And famous, notorious, what was it?
First of all, the first issue had no theme. Half of it was stuff that I'd already written for other publications. But when writing for these places, invariably, because I would bust and this was before writing online where you have to do it that day. So I'd spend way too much time on it and go over it and third, fourth, fifth revision, look at it, and I'd always zero in on a sentence. I'm like, wow, that was good job. Nice turn of phrase. Always what they took out. They had radar for it. It was uncanny, and it happened again and again. And then it was somebody for Details wanted me to write some panels for a comic thing. He rejected that, and I just said, fuck this, I'm going to do it myself. Because Debbie, who was the most negative person who ever lived, she wrote something about how she hated babies because there was this big pop culture baby fetish thing in the 80s, baby boom, and three men and a baby.
It's still
it
here.
was big baby on board. I almost think this was some CIA. They projected they'll need taxpayers in 20 years, so have everybody reproduce or whatever. But she wrote something about how she hated children, and we sent this to the woman who introduced us, and she's like, forget the stupid rap record reviews. This is what you have to do.
Yeah.
I followed her advice, and it was magic. Yeah, because it's it was us unfiltered, and we were just such negative people. It was all genuine.
Is that why you married her?
That was part of it. She was just because I met her. It was at Johnny Thunder's concert, and she had a little button that said "I hate people." She was like, "Oh, they should just drop a bomb and get rid of everyone." I'm like, "Whoa!" This is the first girl I met who talks like the guys talked in Philly. So yeah, it was but there was no redemption from that negativity. There was no. I figured, it was stupid of me. I figured, well, take her away from her horrible parents and the East Coast, but she wanted to be.
So she was Jewish and from Brooklyn, right?
Coney Island, yeah.
Coney, oh boy, okay, that explains a lot. Okay, yeah. She's that kind of Brooklyn Jew. That's it. Yeah, that's a particular kind.
I've
known several accent. Coney Island Jews. They are different than most Jews in the United States.
Her brother, you needed subtitles.
Yeah,
you couldn't understand.
The Coney Island Jews and the Brighton Beach Jews I've known have been tough as hell.
I'm not sure. I think her brother. He's probably in his 70s now. I bet you he's still a virgin. But it was they were both still living at home. He was in his 40s, she was in her 30s. There was something developmentally stunted about them.
Huh.
Yeah. But it was my naivete. Okay, we'll just remove her from that environment, and things will get better. But didn't. Just resolute, stubbornly negative.
You had a little bit of a savior complex.
I think I did. Yeah.
I've been there. Yeah. I tried to save a Jewess once myself.
Save a Jewess,
and I married her too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very different Jewess than your Jewess, but yeah. So you decided to move to Hollywood with the most negative person on earth.
Yeah.
And you were co-editing the zine, right? To get Answer Me.
Co-editing. I mean,
she was on the masthead.
She was a huge part of it just for the attitude, because no one was as negative as her. But if you did page count, she probably had 5% of the page count, and I probably had 90%, and the rest were contributors. I mean, she helped with proofreading and stuff, but I did all the layout. And I mean, it was mostly she was like the Flavor Flav. She was just like that extra flavor, like just these blasts, like blow your face off negativity. And I think that was a huge part of the mag. And people, you're going to do another one? It's like, no, because I'm not in L.A. and she's gone. Those were 2 of the 3 ingredients.
So this is the thing I was wondering about, because you have said elsewhere that you rewrote a lot of her stuff, which
with the unfortunate punch up, like I would not, it wasn't like overhaul, but.
And then I saw the video.
She needed an editor.
I saw the video of the 2 of you being interviewed at the time.
In a basement.
In 94. Yeah.
That's in that Hollywood building.
And it's a fascinating video. I mean, and just watching the body language between the 2 of you and watching, I don't know have you seen it? And her eyes keep going to you constantly. And I know that she accused you later, and other people have accused you of sort of dominating her and controlling her, right? And I could see that in a way, and I can see that being plausible. But then again, my whole position about other people's relationships is that I don't know shit about them, right? So I was curious, because you did say you had rewritten or did heavy editing on her pieces. So, but then it sounds like her ideas were actually authentically hers,
and the attitude
that were expressed
which I
in Answer
didn't
Me.
touch.
Yeah, and the attitude.
I would just like turn a better phrase here and there, and I didn't rewrite it from whole cloth, but. They were kind of disjointed. I think she had structural problems. So.
Yeah. We don't have to dwell on this if you don't want to. But, I'm just curious. I mean, it's just a fascinating thing to me. So the relationship was. I mean, yeah. So what on earth? I mean,
you take an angry person and a depressed person, and that's not a good combination.
Yeah. In the video, you look and are. I mean, you just seem furious. I don't know what. Do you remember what you were angry about that day? Just in general, were you angry?
I mean, just unhappy. Just not a good life. It's just after a while, I think I sensed that she never wanted to be any happier, and never really wanted to develop anything. This was a writer who, like the time I knew her, didn't read a book the whole time, and didn't learn a skill, and didn't have any curiosity, and was. I mean, I think that it was the stubbornly depressed. Like if it was depressed, I could deal with and try to make her happy. But
you said there was nothing redemptive about her misanthropy.
It was really she was. I mean, I called her from jail, and this was after she had been diagnosed with cancer, and said, well, happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, it's my last one. What do you say to that? You don't. You kind of close off it, or there's just nothing. It might have been. It wasn't. She lived a few more years, but it was that tenaciously negative, where it's like, well, then you're just going to make me miserable too, I guess.
Yeah. So that's the other thing I was wondering about.
Do you know who Peter Sotos is?
Yeah, I do now because of studying you.
Okay. Yes. I'm sure I've told this story before. When I was in prison and I was getting lambasted left and right, he offered to write the intro to Shit Magnet. He said the reason why he met me and Debbie in Chicago, we were at some dumb zine festival, and we all went out to some late night Chicago. That's the great thing about Chicago. There's a Greek diner on every corner of the city. And he said when he met her, the first impression was, what a piece of work. He just thought she was nuts, eccentric, neurotic, whatever spin you want to put on it. But he noticed, and she had this lack of self-awareness where she would say something cringeworthy and not realize why everyone just dropped their drink. But he noticed, in those moments, I would cover for her, and I cut her food for her. And he said, the reason I want to write the intro is you're getting lambasted as this controlling monster. When I met you two, it was evident you cared about her, and she didn't give a shit about you. He never got around to writing it, but yeah, I mean, that's sort of how I felt after a while. I think that kind of, didn't care if I was miserable or was being made miserable. It was just one way. And there, it's in extensive detail in Shit Magnet. She did things I didn't think still don't think I'm capable of doing as far as calculated and cold.
Like what?
Get a restraining order saying that you're being beaten every day when you hadn't been touched in years, especially when you have cancer. That's deliberate. That's not just losing your temper, and lashing out. You got to go down to a courthouse and lie about that. And she subsequently told Spin Magazine she lied. That's just a battered woman. Of course, it happened. Shoot me dead right now if I touched her when she had cancer. But this is one of the reasons I never got out. I didn't even bail out. I had no record of convictions. I got arrested. I didn't get out till 2.5 years later.
So when was she diagnosed with cancer?
She was diagnosed in May of '97.
Okay. So
about a month after the Redneck book came out.
So you had moved to Portland at that
We
point?
moved to Portland in late '94, and were not greeted warmly. That was the first, because we were a sensation in that zine world, but the Portland zinesters were not very warm to us. And one scandal after the next happened in the wake of Answer Me. The first one was an obscenity trial over the fourth issue, which was about rape. Then Francisco Martin Duran shot 45 rounds at the White House in late '94, quoted a line from Answer Me number 2, which was the murder issue. The line was, "Can you imagine a higher moral calling than to destroy someone's dreams with one bullet?" The next line was about how murder is an icebreaker, a cocktail party. So there was a little humor in it, but Duran didn't pick up on this. And the third one, I think, was like in ways the most tragic. The third issue was about suicide, and about a year after all this happened, we got a dedicated voice. This was before cell phones, so you could get a dedicated voicemail line. And this was back when long distance, like you called California from Oregon, that was a long distance call. It was expensive. So somebody with a British accent, a girl, like, I just want to know if your P.O. box is still the same as it was in the rape issue. And I didn't answer. Not worth a $5 call to tell her where to send $3.95. The next day she says, "I've changed hotels, and this is my number, and don't bother calling after tomorrow." That's cut me. That was weird. And I called her, and all she wanted to know is if my P.O. box was still valid. And I'm like, yeah, and I just published a book by Peter Sotos. And
explain who Peter Sotos is.
What Peter Sotos is everyone who knows him calls him a sweetheart. But he's probably like, I guess, and he probably cringes at this, the modern Desaad. He writes about brutality unflinchingly. The first time I was exposed to him, it was the same response I had when I heard Straight Outta Compton by NWA. It was just like, this is just beyond my imaginings as far as brutality and violence. And I guess some would say approvingly writes of sexual abuse. And
of children.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And he was the first person, I think, prosecuted in America for possession of child pornography. They started investigating him as a result of a zine that he did.
And you published him in Answer Me.
He's a great writer. I published him in Answer Me, and I published a whole book of his stuff. Guy's a fan. He's huge in France.
Oh, yeah?
Apparently I'm huge in Spain. The Redneck book just came out over the summer in a Spanish translation. Sold out. It's been in every newspaper. It was never covered in a major newspaper.
How do we explain that?
I have no idea. I'm still wondering about that. Yeah, it must be a good translation, I guess.
So.
I don't know.
Wow. Oh, yeah. So you go to Portland where all the ultra politically correct zinesters
That's
are.
not how it was presented to me, though. It was presented to me as, well, you had lesbians on this side and loggers on the other side. So there was this weird tension where it was still this rustic, logging, Bigfoot worshipping town, but it got just overwhelmed with the one side and the other side. I mean, rural Oregon's still that way, but not Portland.
Wow.
And we got hit with obscenity.
Fairly stressful time for you.
And already, PT, if
unimaginable.
It was Annalee Newitz who said that, the rape issue was evidence of somebody with PTSD. Like, this is going into that. And then, like, all this happens, and then I get involved in a tumultuous affair with a stripper.
Okay.
And, that's what most of the book Shit Magnet's about. And someone who was, because when you recount this stuff, you don't want to sound like, oh, she was crazy,
so
man. She's crazy.
Sorry, just so we're clear, like, and I know you've said this publicly, so I know you're okay with it, but like, you had the affair when you were still married to Debbie, and Debbie had cancer.
She got diagnosed with cancer about a month into the affair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was too weak to let go of it. For all the shit I get for beating this girl up, that's why I went to prison. And I'll do as quick a background as I can. This was somebody who was 21, was a stripper. At 21, had already broken up 3 marriages. I think had been diagnosed with something. I'm not a big fan of psychology. I think borderline would apply to this person because somebody who worshipped me at first. But then when I started pulling away, that's it's called splitting. They had to destroy you. And she was that, and this should say something. When I finally got arrested, because I had a restraining order against her, and I had documented all these death threats, and I've still got an MP3 up on my website, jimgoad.net/sound/ANNE.mp3. You can hear her threatening to blow my head off, chop my head off, cut my nipples off. You'll never get away. The cops. Hey, darling, the cops just brought the restraining order. Give this tape to them. I'm not going to stay away from you. One of us is going to wind up dead. Again. And I guess if you're PTSD, let's say, and the only person you've ever loved to this point is dying, that fucks with your head after a while. As warped as this is going to say, not sending her to jail was the dumbest fucking thing I ever did. Because I got a restraining order against her. It was in early May of 98. Tried to get her out of my apartment. She wouldn't leave. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to tell the landlord. I go down. She's beating me on the back of the head the whole way down. He gets her out. He comes back in. I'm like, Russ. He was this gentle little gay man, like a little wizard robe on. I'm like, Russ, I'm really sorry. At least she's gone. The second I said gone, we hear a smash. She took the neighbor's shovel, smashed my car windshield in. I go out. I tell Russ to call the cops. I restrain her. She's screaming. She bites me in my chest, hangs off of my chest, like off the ground by her teeth. The cops said it was the worst bite mark they'd ever seen. Cops get there. Well, Ms. Ryan, how'd this happen? Oh, he raped me. I'm like, nah, this is not happening. She recanted that, thankfully, because if they saw the rape issue, they probably would have believed it. But they took us both down, and I got a restraining order against her. And you know, kind of emasculating for a guy. It's me and 3 dozen women with black eyes, and guys just get loud. Oh, you're a pussy. What, you can't tell? Oh, you must have done something wrong. But then if you take legal action, then I figured that this at least would stop her from hitting me. However dumb, and she hit me 3 times in the next 3 weeks, and I called the cops 3 times, and 3 times I called the cops before they got there and said, forget about it. Because I'd been to jail. I've been beaten up my whole life, been to jail a few times. Jail's worse. I didn't have that coldness. She had no problems with that. So final night, she attacked me on a bus. Probably see a scar here on my elbow. She bit me on a bus. Everyone's laughing. Oh, go on Jerry Springer. This is hilarious. She's beating up a guy. Called the cops again, told the cops to forget about it. We got together again. Again, not saying I'm functional. But yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night, took her home, and I told her to get out of the car. She didn't. She attacked me. I grabbed her wrists, figured, why are you taking this here? I could get you arrested. Black dude walks up, and I mention he's black because it's Portland. It should be easy to find detectives. They never found him. He lived in her building. Mm-hmm. You okay? And I let go of her wrists because as much of an evil monster, controlling, abusive, Machiavellian, I could have gotten her arrested right there just for being in my presence. I'm like, no, we're cool. We're cool. I watch him go in. I turn back. She wallops me, punch right in the nose. I see blood coming out of my nose in the rearview mirror. I drove her up the hills, beat the shit out of her over the course of 10, 15 minutes and dropped her off up in the hills. And the biggest charge they gave me was kidnapping, because in Oregon you move somebody against their will 3 feet or more. Like if you rob a pizzeria and tell them to get into the other room, it's kidnapping. But they tried to give me 25 years. I got arrested. I figured I'd be out over the weekend because all this evidence I had. But the law doesn't work. The law works to perpetuate the law. I didn't realize that at the time. They have beds to fill, contracts. They got new dirt to till somewhere and build a new prison. And so they did a grand jury. I was going to face 7.5 years every day because these were laws. I think in Oregon now there's no such thing as like pleading down or serving good time for good behavior. You do every day of every sentence you get. But I was facing 7.5 years. 3 months into it, they threw that out and did a second grand jury. I was going to get 25 years. No record. Record of arrest, but no record of conviction. And so my friend Sean Tedgerachi, who I'll be seeing for lunch today, I haven't seen him in like a dozen years, great guy, even though he cringes to hear it. He got her while I was in jail. She started calling him up. And in Oregon, you're allowed to record somebody without their knowledge. And she's saying, how's our cancer patient doing? Yeah, this is wonderful. She's going to die. He's going away for 25 years. I'm jerking off to it. We took those tapes to the DA. He's like, I want to cut a deal. So he offered me 3 years. Back then, when they had good time, I did a little under 2.5 years. And that's when you feel the state's thumb on you like that, because you start to realize, like, debt to society. So I didn't do anything to society. This was 5 a.m. Society was sleeping. But you realize you're used as this punching bag for people's own weird vengeance, bloodlust, guilt complexes to just take it out on you. And I realized that in prison. It's like, we're not here to be cured. We're here to have it baked into us. You're like marked. Merle Haggard did. I was listening to a Merle Haggard song when I got arrested. I'm a Lonesome Fugitive as a song. But he did a song that's very similar called Branded Man. It's about getting out of prison. It's like, it doesn't matter where you go. You got a mark on you. Mm-hmm. But I never, obviously, I never shy away from talking about it because it comes up all the time. People try to use it to discredit whatever I'm saying. It's like, well, I'm not sure if you discredit as far as honesty, because I don't think you're ever going to find a criminal more honest about what happened.
No, it's
But it plays into just this idea. It's another reason I have problems with leftism, because when you have this whole oppression power dynamic thing, there are going to be black psychopaths and female psychopaths. Oh, we're presumed innocent? I'm going to go brutalize the shit out of somebody and claim they did it to me. And it was much more gray with this girl. But this girl was writing a book called Milking the System. And how to pretend you're mentally ill to get SSI, how to do false rape and domestic violence charges and get guys in trouble. Her mom told the detective she thinks that she had some fantasy about getting men that she loves in trouble. Her idol was Courtney Love. She loved what she did to Kurt Cobain. But yeah, 2.5 years, but marked for life for it. But I always wanted to talk about it, but not for the rest of my life. That's why I want to do one episode of the podcast. I don't care if it's 14 hours. I'll bring in everyone who was there at the time. But hopefully be able to tuck that away one day.
Yeah. God damn. Okay, so I knew all of this, but it's hearing you in front of me say this is
when
still
you've been in a
stunning.
cage. Well,
and let me just say, it's the honesty that is. I wish that we could just separate that from the rest of it, just for a minute at least.
Right.
Just separate that, what you do, and celebrate that.
I don't have this need to be liked.
Because let me tell you something. What you did, what you admit to doing, has been done to some degree or another by most people, okay? And then I would say that the vast majority of people have wished to do what you did, and none of them will talk about it. And you do, and you didn't talk much of it. I don't think you mentioned Debbie's role in this, right? According to you,
she got me. I did not bail out because she lied on a restraining order and saying I was beating her every day when she had cancer and I hadn't touched her in years. And she told Spin Magazine. Yeah, she told Spin Magazine that was a lie. But everyone, of course, it happened. You're a battered woman.
But you did hit her, and I know that because you wrote about it in exquisite detail. Yes. You wrote about it. Now, of course, you could be lying, right? But everyone should read this piece, which I guess is a chapter in the book, as well as on your website, about Debbie and about hitting her. And
there's a chapter I wrote in Ship Magnet called "A Womb of Our Own."
I think there's a long piece on your website that I read. I think it's called just Cancer or something like that. It's about Debbie and cancer and beating her. And
there's one called "Why I Resisted Entering a Public Feud with a Cancer Patient."
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where it's this myth. I'm getting out of prison. This mob's meeting me at the gates, peppering me with all these questions, and I'm just answering them one because it was, just an agonizingly horrible situation. Somebody dying, but lying at the and you look like a dick just defending yourself.
Oh, it's impossible. There's nothing you can do.
Impossible.
There's nothing you can do. But you did. You even cataloged it. I think you said 2 punches, 2 kicks to the shin, a couple of slaps over 12 years. Or something? Yeah. So you don't deny it.
No,
and
I never. Here's the thing people don't understand about me. Oh, you're just saying that to look good. It's I don't give a fuck about looking good. That should be obvious.
It does not make you look good. I'll tell you that.
It shouldn't be obvious to anyone. I just don't have that chip, that social chip.
It doesn't make you look good at all. It makes you look honest.
Well, or like a monster, because there's a thing on my Wikipedia page when they asked me about this Sky girl, because I call her Anne in the book. She changed her name to Sky when she was 16, but she was such a publicity whore. I'm like, oh, you're Anne for the book. And but I was asked by John Straussbaugh at the New York Press. He did a whole cover story called "Jim Goad is a Bad Man," and he kept asking me about this incident. Do you feel bad? I'm like, fuck. And here's the context. People always complain it was taken out of context. I'm like, look, the only person I ever loved was dying. I copped to what I did. I copped to what I felt horrible about, which was the cheating. Somebody's alone in a fucking house. Kill me. That's horrible. And anybody who wants to give me shit, focus on that. I'll eat shit.
That's in the piece too.
That's horrible. Mm-hmm. But then you hook up with somebody who's clearly malicious. I've got a lawyer friend who he defends death penalty cases. He's a public defender. He deals with serial killers. Put Fisher Price toys up their victims' vaginas after they strangle them to death. He talked to her a couple times when we were going out. He's like, that's one of the most dangerous people walking the streets of America these days. She is clinically psychotic. And So, and this is somebody who I gave every chance to just get away and took a restraining order and didn't send her to jail. Then, on top of that, and then, jerking off to the ex-wife, all that, and then, like, bloodies my nose. No, I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed hitting her. Mm-hmm. But all you see in Wikipedia, do you have any remorse? No, I enjoy, monster. Yeah. But I think I like to speculate it's flattering. Maybe people just think I'm a moron. That's fine. We won't exchange Christmas cards. But
I mean, you could be a monster, but you would at least be an honest monster.
Honest monster.
Oh, really? Maybe that's the title of your next book. I mean, really.
I'd have a much better career if I was acted penitent. I know how to play people.
Oh, yeah.
I just didn't. I think there was a bigger purpose here. It's like so much of the violence in my life has been at the hands of women. Mm-hmm. But that never, when people talk about domestic violence, that's just not ever mentioned. And I had a lot of time to research this shit in prison. The biggest, most comprehensive study of family violence, Strauss and Gellis, Gelles, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but I think they were based in Chicago, like 30,000 families. They studied family violence. 50% mutual. 25% just the woman hitting the man, 25% just the man hitting the woman. Why, when we hear domestic violence, is it only a guy hitting a woman? Or, interracial violence, any of this stuff. When the statistics don't bear it out, but it's this moralistic narrative that fucks everything up. Yeah. And she was genius at standing behind her vagina in these cases because she knew where the sympathy was.
Yeah. American politics, I have said, is a morality play performed by a very small number of actors on a very tiny stage in front of a gigantic audience.
Yes.
And in particular, I think that's true with what's called domestic violence. It's just a morality play. I mean, well, I'd say there's more actors in this case, but it's certainly a morality play. In the strictest terms, that's what you're talking about, right? I mean, so when I read this about you, and I read your own, everything I know about this is from you, by the way. The blood kind of goes cold a little bit, and I'm trying to figure out what to feel and think about this.
Right.
But you had me won over by the end of it, actually midway through, because of just brilliant honesty. And the unwillingness, the total unwillingness to play the morality game, to say, you said, at one point you did say, I think something like it was bad of me or it was wrong, sure. But it's just, here's actually what happened, and it's 1,000 times more complex than your little morality play about the monster man victimizing the poor, weak woman. Which it is. Every relationship is.
In prison, I was, after like 2 years, because I was cut off from the outside world, like you didn't have internet access or any of those things, I started wishing I was crazy. I would have liked to have been Ike Turner. Well, even Ike Turner, apparently, like Tina Turner says she hit him too, but you never hear about that. I was wishing it would have been so much more convenient. Oh, I'm just this dick asshole and I got caught. That would have been much better than what it was. I was like way too fucking nice until I lost my temper. And that's like a much more powerless position to be in. I started wishing I was crazy and I was imagining that she hit me this night. It got to that point. What cured me, because I already told you about holding her wrists. Okay. I was celled up with this guy. His name was Richard Thomas. He claimed he was a cousin of Richard John Boy Walton Thomas from the most famous 70s drama, The Waltons. Mm-hmm. And he was, back then you got good time. I would get out 6 months early if I didn't get into any fights.
You were in my hometown, Salem.
Salem, yeah. Okay,
that's where all the prisons are in Oregon.
Yeah. Well, I was actually in a co-ed one in Portland for about 4 days, but they looked up my file and sent me back, which was weird because you ate together and walked the track together, but your dorms.
Hometown meaning I live there now. Salem is bizarre because I think it's the only city in America where the prisons are sort of almost downtown. And they kind of put them on display. It's right on Main Street in Salem. You drive by them on a regular basis, and there's like 6 of them inside Salem. And
this was at OSP, the penitentiary. They called
that's the maximum security.
Maximum with Bobby Beausoleil from the Manson family, I-5 killer. But it was the mellowest place out of everywhere I was.
Yeah, you wrote another amazing piece about this. Right, I was expecting, oh, Jesus Christ, 2.5 years, white guy, rape, assault.
I didn't hear of one rape happening in Portland at the time, the Oregon system was like 70% white. I didn't hear of one rape happening to anybody the whole time. Not sure what's up with that. Because I did in Answer Me, I interviewed Donnie the Punk, who's dead now from AIDS. He was a super genius guy. He was a Quaker. He protested the Vietnam War on the White House lawn, got a $10 fine.
God damn.
Got raped 65 times. I believe every word of that. I think what happened is they've expanded.
Wait a second. Why did he go to prison?
He didn't pay the $10 fine.
For being a conscientious objector, right?
Quaker.
Yeah.
Right.
For Vietnam.
And well, fuck this guy. And I think he made the mistake of telling me he was a reporter, so they purposely put him in the worst block in D.C. jail. When I was in OSP, I started wishing that I was insane. Because, like I said, it would have been a much more comfortable role just to be this abusive asshole, because you're in power, at least that way. Mm-hmm. So I'm in with John Boy Walton's cousin, and he started saying, if you're of note of any level in prison, if you're a writer or if you're infamous, like you're a superstar. And so everyone, you write a book, and I'll tell my girlfriend to get the book. And his girlfriend got the hardcover of Redneck Manifesto, and there's a picture of me on there. I don't think it's a good picture. She thought it was. She told him she thought I was a good-looking guy. Big mistake. Every night, you're getting some wrinkles there around the eyes, Jim. Oh, look at those gray hairs coming. Like these little passive-aggressive, bitchy things he would say. And again, but like I had a calendar on the wall, like you're marking off every day. Don't get into a fight because you're going to do 6 extra months. So all of a sudden, after 2 weeks of these little passive-aggressive comments, I'm like, what the fuck is your problem, man? As he lunges at me, I grab his wrists, roll my eyes inwardly, thinking, why does he have to escalate it like this? Then it hit me, that's exactly what the fuck happened the night of my crime. And it's like, well, fuck, I'm not insane. The world is for thinking it's this cut and dry all the time. It was much more complicated. Right. I could have sent her to jail. I doubt she would have done. My fear was if I sent her to jail, she'd get out the next night because she was a girl and it's Oregon and everything. But never get credit for just not sending her to jail because to me that's much more calculated and cold and sadistic than just walloping somebody in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, but you got a lot of hate about Debbie and what you not just doing the affair when she had cancer, but the hitting, right? And so did she hit you ever?
Never.
Yeah. Okay.
Never. And more than the hitting was screaming. It was constant. Yeah. I never downplay. I got no reason to. Because another thing, people suggest I'm on the spectrum somewhere. And I read something, there was some website about, because I guess there's an autism community. And they have a term, neurotypical. That's their disparaging term for people who don't have autism. And this
the
page,
normies?
Yeah, and he's describing it's like, well, social approval is more important than anything, so they're prone to be liars, and they'll lie about little things and big things just so everyone I'm reading along, yeah. So maybe I am, but it's like, sorry, like, I'm okay with myself. I don't need to be. I think so many people need to be liked overwhelms everything and the need to fit in. Definitely overwhelms any personal integrity they have, especially when it comes to matters of fact.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but I'm just not, and I think some people hate me for that and some people admire it.
Yeah, that brings me to, to broaden the lens a little bit here. You answer me, I mean, you presented it and you presented yourselves as misanthropic. I think you even used the term, right? And
Misanthropology was the term.
You embraced this thing, right? You celebrated your hatred of all people.
We were misanthropologists.
Yeah. Right? And I was thinking about that. I used to, at the time you were doing Answer Me, I was in graduate school at Columbia University, training to be a leftist intellectual. Strangle me, please.
That's what they teach.
Yeah, and I was trying to think about what I would have thought of you.
Even if your major is business, that's what they teach these days.
And I probably just would have thought, well, it's either not worth my time or, it's just sort of like a waste of time, what they're doing, at best. But I actually think misanthropy is quite useful politically, and I think it may be it might save us. In a sense, which is that misanthropy is a statement, I think, in part, that I will never go along with a group, a tribe. I will never belong. I'm not interested in belonging.
Right.
Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not, because a lot of these, there are books coming out. And this article in Willamette Week in Portland is coming out next week. I'm being blamed for the alt-right, the rise of the alt-right. And what baffles me, I'd like to see what the neurological evidence of this is. I understand fully people are social, and I don't even give them shit for it. I understand you're different than me. You like hanging out in crowds. You would rather tell a million lies and have someone dislike you. I understand that. When I tell them I don't want to be part of your crowd, I'd rather just be honest with myself. They think I'm lying, or they think, that's just, you just don't want to be called this, or, like this extreme alt-right guys where you just don't want them to call you a Nazi. It's like, they call me a Nazi anyway, dumbass. What social benefit do I get from alienating you and everyone else? Mm-hmm. But it's just honesty. But I guess if you're not wired that way, I'm going to seem like something different.
Yeah. Yeah. You're never going to join our party. God damn it.
I still get that. I mean, that's one thing I think we were saying before the mics were turned on with Gavin when I would interview proofread his articles for Taki's mag. He would always say we. I always say I. And even when the Redneck book came out, they put in a subhead that I had nothing to do with on the hardcover. America's Scapegoats, how we got this way and why we're not going to take it anymore. Like some lame network reference. But I'm like, you got to take that off. That's not me, and I don't speak for anybody. And they changed it to how Hillbillies, Hicks, and White Trash became America's Scapegoats for the paperback. But no, never claimed to speak. And I don't identify right-wing. I mean, I'm defensively white. I know I'm going to be targeted or blamed for being white. Then I got a problem. Like, as far as, like, exulting in it, I got other things to do. I don't identify with collective accomplishments or shame.
Yeah, I love that you write for Taki's magazine, and many of their writers, all of them except for you maybe, but certainly many of them do sort of celebrate whiteness, being white, being a part of the white race, correct?
I'm not sure if there's a ton of websites that are like that. I'm not sure.
I mean, that's Gavin's thing, is that...
No, Gavin definitely, and especially recently, is like anti-racist,
No, but he's about Western civilization and how white people have built all these wonderful things.
But he does take white out of that, though. He says the West and white are two different things, and that's why they're all at each other's throats now.
Well, but I found it funny, and this is another reason I liked you a lot, was that apparently Taki's readers have not liked you for not doing this, for not identifying as white.
Totally. There's, I'm not going to name them and give them the glory, but there's a website that just reviewed my book, The New Church Ladies, and they've also reviewed my book, The Redneck Manifesto and Shit Magnet, and it's always the same thing. Oh, he's a great writer. I wish he would at least admit he's on our team.
Right.
But again, they don't understand, I'm not getting any benefit from anybody for not joining a team. Yeah. I just get arrows shot at me from all sides.
Well, you've never been interested in being on a team.
I mean, last team I was on, I guess, I consider myself a liberal up until I was about 30, and it just too much of it didn't make sense. I don't think the hatred. I mean, you get smart people, and they want to explain complex geopolitical struggles over resources with hate. It's that's like a 4-year-old would look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all moralism. So
I'm amoral. I think nature's amoral.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that's been written about me was John Strasbott's on the Wikipedia page. He may be this bad man everyone says, but when you talk to him, he's got a code of ethics. He sticks to them. He could probably kick your ass in a debate about his ethics. And I found that moralists and ethical people are two different breeds. I'm not saying I'm an ethical person. I'm just saying people I've known that are really good never make a point about it. They're not memeing, and the girls kidnapped by Boko Haram. Unless you're flying over there and saving them, shut the fuck up. Unless you're actually helping these people, thumping your chest about it is something entirely different. You're standing in front of a crowd saying, "Don't hit me, hit this other person who doesn't care."
Yeah.
It's like puppies on a box crawling to get at the tit. I'm better, he's bad, kill him. I'm developing this overall philosophy. It might take me, decades to write a book about if I'm still alive, but. How moralism and being ethical are almost at loggerheads, almost two opposing forces.
There's an obvious similarity with Nietzsche. I'm sure you've gone down that road.
Yeah, beyond good and evil.
Yeah.
I never use the word evil.
Yeah.
I even use the word good, or right. Definitely not righteous or anything. Because I understand. I just think in evolutionary terms. People, what's good to them is what ensures their survival, and what's evil is what threatens it. That's the only constant in people's definition, because the two sides of a war, they're always both sides of the good guys.
Yeah, so you've concentrated on politics for a good 20 years now, right?
Because you got to go back to that, because they took all the fun out of everything else, so you got to go back and fix that until you can have fun again, is the way I look at it. They had all these speech codes, and that's when I drifted away from punk rock, because to me it was about doing drugs and having fun. I mean, I had no game in my teens and early 20s, so it wasn't about sex because I wasn't getting any, but about going to a show, having fun, like. And all of a sudden, all the vegans show up, and all the "you can't say this" people show up, and you have to punch up, and it has to be about. It's like, oh, fuck you. But after a certain point, it's when I started getting put on trial for obscenity or going to prison instead of somebody who was a willing combatant because of political ideas about men are always evil and women are always. I just to save the entire enterprise, you kind of go in and deal with the mechanics there. I started writing short stories. I'd like to do more of that sort of thing. The last one I wrote was about a woman who, she was a dissatisfied housewife of a pharmaceutical magnate who did like herpes pills, and but she always was unsatisfied by him, so he left her this huge inheritance, and she developed an STD that would infect only men who couldn't make her come. Like her orgasmic secretions would kill the virus. Mm-hmm. The next one's going to be about a guy who got a literal pain in his ass when I reacted like a pain in the ass to somebody. When he's in the window seat on the airplane, but he always has to pee and everything, and he would start getting stabbing pains in his rectum. I've done about 13. They're always like someone's mental pathology is manifesting itself physically in these. And it's fun, and the podcast. And I do think talking, I come off less monstrous than writing.
Oh, not at all. Your podcast, which is brand new, right? A couple months you've been doing it?
Yeah, 13 episodes so far.
Yeah, it's... One
was a cheat, which was just clips from a radio show I did 15 years ago.
Everyone should listen to it. I'm supposed to disavow part of it, and part
disavow
of me...
it all? Go ahead. I mean, if it saves your ass, I don't.
No, I don't disavow. No, I don't. I mean, there's some things that I want to challenge you on. Mm-hmm. I don't think you're wrong about anything, right? I just think there's some things maybe you haven't considered, but I don't care. Yeah. I'm not offended, and I don't think you're a bad person. I don't think you're wrong in any way. I mean, you go after the left hard, which is what I do too. Right. You and I hate the left. I mean, we really...
I hate whoever has
who has the power.
The moral power.
Yeah, exactly.
The power to declare what's good and evil.
Yeah, since World War II, the liberal left has basically held the moral power. It's an amazing turning point in history, in American history, is World War II.
I see it more like because, I'm 56. When I was a kid, you couldn't be a communist, you couldn't be gay, you couldn't hang out with black people, you couldn't say anything bad about God. To me, that's all right-wing stuff, right-wing censor. Well, you couldn't talk about sex, nipple. You couldn't say it was scandalous, and that was 1939. Gone with the Wind. So I don't give a damn.
So liberals immediately after World War II were anti-communist and totally puritanical. Okay.
After World War II, okay.
Yeah, and guess what they are now? Anti-communist, anti-Russian, and totally puritanical. So that hasn't changed.
The whole Russia thing is like 20 episodes. That's just such a mass delusion.
It's completely amazing.
Yeah, I was amazed it was The Nation that came out with the article where they talked about the transfer speeds.
But have you noticed that since that article, they've just run just a string of pro-Russiagate conspiracy theory pieces, no. their podcasts, their articles. It's sort of like they disavowed that article somehow. I don't know what's going on there.
See, I thought that whole thing was out of steam. And I've said, again, as a guy who's on the fringes, who doesn't understand social psychology, you can't shit on half of America and expect them to vote for you. That's why she lost. Yeah, that's so obvious. You made your disdain for these people clear.
Here's a great idea. Let's impeach him and remove him from office with no legal justification, because that will certainly calm down the right wing.
The right wing?
Can you imagine? I mean, my last guest on the show said, yeah, you want a civil war? Think about all the 500 million guns that are owned in this country. Uh-huh. How many of them are owned by Trump supporters? And you're going to take that guy away who they voted for, the one time they won something in their life. Right. You think they're not going to start shooting people?
I wonder, because I got into an argument with what's now an ex-friend, because he was all... right before the election when he's saying, well, I might challenge the results. Oh, he's undermining our democracy. And then, like, the minute he was elected, the Russia and he was saying that it was like absurd for him to even say that he would challenge. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, Kennedy apparently stole the '60 election, dealing with Chicago corruption, and Bush stole the 2000, his brother in Florida. Like, it's not one side that does this. Like, they're for power,
of course.
But and he's like, and that these hillbillies and Cletuses would have been rioting in the fucking streets if this. And I'm like, they have the hillbillies and Cletuses haven't been riding the streets in generations. That's been your side. Your side's been riding. And he's like, yeah, and we should still ride because we're not getting. I'm like, all right, I'm done with you. I'm like,
oh yeah, I mean, I agree that the right wing, these people, the neo-Nazis and whoever we're talking about here, the Klansmen, have been zero threat basically for decades now. I'm just saying, if they did remove Trump for those reasons, then we might actually see some shooting.
I think I've used the metaphor before. One thing progressives understand is divorce. They understand that you can just not get along with somebody and you can't be compatible, and it's probably best to part ways.
Yeah.
I think I think what's going on now is a symptom. I think that the nation's too big to function, and they're, California might secede. God bless. Like I think. What happened to me in going to jail? I distrust the state in any form. But most terrifying would be a global government and then a federal state. Make it local. That's fine. Everyone secede and start back again.
Amen.
I just think that a nation is usually, it's people who are on the same page somehow. No one's on the same page anymore. I don't think this nation's going to last.
It really makes no sense. 350 million people?
Yeah.
What? Across this vast expanse of land, which includes mountains and deserts and swamps. What are you talking about?
Different religions,
and we have the
systems,
South and the North
right.
and the West and the who? What?
People with different historical grievances and people who don't feel responsible for those. It's
and
a
how
recipe
many languages are spoken? How many different
right.
cultures are there? I mean, what are we doing here?
I think that's the sensible thing, but it would probably be bloody either way. I don't think the nation's ever going to come.
I really want California to do it first, right?
Yeah.
let them have their green republic, and we'll see how that goes. I would.
Pretty bankrupt already, right?
Yeah, they're getting there. Yeah, they're working on it. Yeah, but I think it would be a great first move. Jesus Christ, Jim Goad, what are we going to do with you?
Yeah, well,
you're so antisocial.
The nuns have been. They didn't say Jesus Christ, but the nuns were asking that back in the '60s.
Oh man.
But I think that this is almost the inverse because Answer Me came out in an anthology, and there's an interview at the beginning of it, and I said, because you had these cutesy murder zines when Answer Me came out. I'm like, I think true crime is best written by a true criminal. But I think social criticism, it's the opposite. I think you need someone antisocial because they have perspective.
Yeah.
They're not in the thick of it.
Yeah. So you're a racist. Okay, let's do that.
Sure.
So you wrote a piece in which it's called "Am I a Racist?" Right?
Depends on how you define racist. Right?
Isn't that the title of it though? Am I a racist?
It's the whole title is "Am I Racist?" Depends on how you define racist. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. And so
because when I was a kid, they've moved the goalpost. The term is swollen since I was a kid.
Yeah, so
when I was a kid, it was like you wanted to harm somebody because they were doing.
Yeah, I'll tell you what your ideas about race are. They are the ideas held by 99% of Americans, which is that there are biological, physical differences among the races of human beings.
It's a product of evolution on different
and you can
continents.
see this by what you call patterns. What do you call it?
Just pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition, right?
Yeah.
So patterns of behavior among different groups, right?
Behavior is the one I'm still agnostic about, don't know enough about. I think everyone will allow for physical differences.
So like IQ.
Well, that's still contentious. Physical differences, and you got to be dumb to think that Koreans stand a chance in the NBA.
Totally.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
The real contentious one is IQ, but I think that's pretty evident. And it doesn't make you a white supremacist because whites tend to score. Defining a white as a non-Jewish person of European extraction, they're around 100. They set the bar pretty much.
I mean, you would have to be a complete idiot or a total liar to say that Japanese are exactly the same physically as Nigerians, right? I mean,
a liar, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so that's clear. The question, there's several questions, but one question I have is, it's this term race and where it gets applied, where the lines are drawn, right? Between the races, that's where it gets really, really tricky.
People play a lot of semantic tricks with this. I've said the only time the term the human race would have meaning would be under a Martian invasion. Because then we're all a group. We're all being attacked. It's like prisoners. There was so little tension among prisoners because you're all wearing the same uniform. The enemy's the state. But it's just I think people are a little disingenuous. It's for classification. Yeah, the Irish weren't what the Irish fought with the English, but then you bring Pakistanis over, and the Irish and English suddenly have more common cause because they look alike. There's a there's a phenotypical. I like to say, people of different continental origins. I think that's kind of tidy. People who, originated in Europe or Africa or South America or, Asia.
Is it that tidy, though? I mean,
it's tidier. It's it's for classification. Sure, there's minutiae you can split hairs about, but I think people know what you're talking about. I think people know that you can't put. Who are the smallest people on earth? I don't know. Maybe Koreans. I've had bad problems with Koreans. Bad experiences with Koreans. Humorless and intense.
Again, you're black, apparently.
That's to Koreans, I guess.
The whole black Korean thing, the beef. Yeah.
Oh, Black Korea, Ice Cube. Yeah.
The riots that you witnessed here.
Yeah.
Right. That was very much a black Korean beef right there.
And Ice Cube did a whole song about it. I don't know if this was before or after the riots, called Black Korea. Yeah. But I think it's just we'd be one race if we're talking about the solar system or the universe. And I've always said if there were identical twins left, they'd find a way to play Crips and Bloods. People will find a way to war.
Right.
But I think phenotypical. I think one thing that changed since I wrote the Redneck book, and this is the only thing that's changed, and that book was 20 years ago. I figured if you just left people alone and didn't manipulate them, they'd get along. I don't believe that anymore. I think people are tribal for a million different reasons, and I think race cuts one of the deepest, because that's birth and your progeny, and I think you're naturally more altruistic. Animals are toward animals that look like them. I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's where people get me wrong. I'm not trying to justify. I'm just saying that's probably why it happens. I've always said, true and false, not right and wrong. Get the fucking morality out of it. Just figure out why it happens. And I just think this American experiment's probably doomed because not everyone's that compatible. I
mean, it's undeniable as a pattern. I mean, you can just see that pattern. You can see people identifying with people who look like themselves, right? Sure. The question is does that constitute a race?
I would say continental ancestry.
But then you have like Ethiopians and Congolese who look very, very different.
Right. But
on the same continent.
They'd probably be, they pass through Ellis Island black.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's my problem here. So
there's sub-Saharan and northern Africans would probably be considered two different races, and they might be by the people who draw up those border lines. I think the Berbers and Arabs might be considered Caucasian. Not sure how that works. Semites.
It's absurd. So I mean, the Poles, right, were illiterate peasants 50 years ago, overwhelmingly, and now they're white, just like everyone else. The Caucasian race,
because I think you brought more non-pale people in, so these people generally aggregate more.
The Caucasian category was basically invented here in World War II.
When I was a kid, the race war was Irish versus Italians.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all. Everyone was a Catholic.
So here's the thing, though, Jim. So you've had these, notorious race realists on your podcast. Jared Taylor, and he's the most famous one, I guess. I don't know their work. I haven't read them. I've listened to them on your podcast, and it doesn't seem to me that they're aware of this. Are they aware of this? I mean, do they know? I mean, have they dealt with this question about how race has been redrawn in infinite ways over the years, how it changes infinitely?
Especially Jared Taylor has.
Yeah? I mean, okay. I'm just curious.
He's a student of history. He knows,
I mean, again,
100 Years War. And
I don't really give a shit. I'm just curious about the thinking there. And
he's not even a white supremacist. That's I did a whole montage because Jared Taylor enunciates very clearly.
He's an Asian supremacist, ironically, in a way.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of these guys, I mean, if you believe in IQ differences, you call them, those, of course, because they're tilted in favor of whites, but whites don't do the best on them.
Oh, here's why I don't give a shit. And this is the thing I've been saying about Spencer and Jared Taylor and all these guys for a long time since I first heard about them, is what do they want? And you asked Andrew Anglin this question, who's the Daily Stormer guy.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. And every one of them, so far as I can tell, has said, we want basically to be left alone. In Spencer's case, I think it's a white homeland, but
no state, right?
You want a that means leaving in some way, right? Separating from the United States.
Well, the big question is how, right?
Yeah, and so does that mean killing a whole bunch of Negroes on your way out? I mean, is that in the plans? I've seen them.
I've never heard anybody say that.
They just want to be left alone. I mean, Taylor said that. Andrew Anglin said that.
Anglin, I think specifically, so he wants the world that was with his, great-grandfathers.
Well, okay, but how do you get that? And
that's always the big question.
But I don't see. First of all, they're not like organizing political parties. Right? They have zero power in the media. They are scarcely organized. when they hold a rally, at best, 300 people show up, maybe? Charlottesville, something like that.
They were fed to the lions in Charlottesville, though.
Yeah. I mean, there are a bunch of trolls online. And when you see them in person, they are the least scary people in this country.
One of the things, too, I forget who asked me this, but I think it might have been the Michael A. Hoffman, because a lot of these alt-right guys, the suit-wearing guys, they really look down on Southern white trash and rednecks. And
I'm sure.
Because for so many decades, the only person voicing some of these concerns was somebody on Jerry Springer who lived in a trailer and had a meth lab.
Yeah. The uses of the redneck. Yeah.
Yeah, and a point that I made was, well, black academics, you don't get that disdain for ghetto behavior. Not generally, unless it's like a black conservative. Mm-hmm. They see it, we're all black. And, you touched the least of us, you touched us all. Mm-hmm. That's where these alt-right guys, they don't have that whole white, it's like white elitism. And they see rednecks as like an embarrassment. I mean, yeah, but I haven't, I think I asked Anglin, but the conversation got sidetracked. Like, how would this happen? Mm-hmm. That's the only question that I'd be curious. Like, how would it be bloodless?
I'm guessing that you've had them on your show and you're interested in them because their criticism of the left is usually on point.
That's what we have in common, right?
Yeah, the hypocrisy, the dishonesty, the incredible dishonesty on the left around race, they nail that stuff, and I agree with them on that stuff, most of that stuff, right? And I assume that's why you're interested in them?
We share a common enemy.
Yeah. And they do that part of it pretty well. Yeah, no, I saw Richard Spencer on the Roland Martin show. Did you see that, this interview?
I didn't see that one, no.
Yeah, so it's Roland Martin's this black journalist,
yes.
And he's an idiot, and
he's
just
unhappy.
Totally moralistic. It's sort of what you'd expect. It was right after the inauguration, I think. And, Spencer says, hey, we just want to leave. We just want a homeland and go away. That's it. We don't want to deal with black people. And Martin just wouldn't let him go and needed to destroy him and punish him.
Right.
And I was thinking, wait a minute, isn't this guy the greatest gift to black people and anti-racists? I mean, he wants to take all the racists and leave the country. Why don't you give him a bunch of money and some boats and even some territory? It's amazing.
I think someone like, I don't speak for Richard Spencer, but I've seen it expressed in comment sections on some of these websites that, as people vote with their feet. Like they might, like someone like Tim Wise, who's an anti-racist. Once he lives in a 99.8% white neighborhood, like something crazy. A lot of these people think that they might complain about white people in white countries, but deep down they know that it's better than it is in all black countries. So they have a parasitic, and it might have been Orwell, like, don't do a favor to someone because they'll never forgive you. Like, if someone's actually helping you, you might resent them because you're humiliated. I'm speculating. I mean, but I think that's probably what some of these guys would like. Why don't you go? If it's so bad, why don't you go too? That's probably what they'd say.
Oh, well, I mean, they're so enmeshed in their own guilt and projection and all this stuff. I mean, it's endless. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I just want to say, your writing, your podcast are hilarious also.
I was class clown in high school. A few people know that.
Yeah, that was the
voted class.
That was the first thing that stuck out to me when I started reading you. But yeah, man, everyone should read you. I really do think you're one of the best journalists in this country.
Many thanks. I appreciate it. And it's a term I never use because when people say that, when someone calls himself a journalist, you got an activist there.
You're a writer. You're an intellectual.
It's all opinion writing.
Whatever.
But I'd like to stick to the facts at least.
No, but you have arguments that are backed up. You have evidence. These are. It's something.
I think if it was journalism, you wouldn't know how I felt.
Your prose, I'll say it again, is elegant and accessible.
Thanks.
Yeah, no,
so I can't take you to lunch. We got the other lunch.
I'm done filleting you now. So, I find you fascinating.
I find myself fascinating sometimes.
And I think, on so many levels, like the biography is just astonishing.
No, that's a story, yeah.
But your ideas are equally interesting and make me think. And I wish they would make more people think.
Much appreciated. I've told this story before. I think this sums me up. I don't remember it happening. My brother says since I was born in June, I was like the youngest in my classes because I was born right at the end of the school year. So I was 5 when I started first grade. He says the nun got up and wrote something on the blackboard. First day of class, and little 5-year-old me stood up, raised my hand, and said, "You spelled that wrong." She's like, "You sit down." I'm like, "I will when you correct it." and I got sent to the principal's office. That's been my life ever since.
Yeah.
And people, it's to shock. It's like, I actually think you're wrong. I sincerely, and if people see the sincerity, that's all that they really need to see. If I'm wrong, tell me where I'm wrong. Otherwise, if you just think I'm being an asshole, then we're not probably going to agree. And I got done trying to argue motive, because you can't prove what motivates you. Mm-hmm. That's why people do it all the time, because you can't prove it or disprove it. Yeah. It's easy.
Yeah. Final thing. The greatest podcast episode I have ever heard is your episode with your roommate. You just interviewed your roommate, and her name's Dawn
Clark.
Dawn Clark.
Yeah, Dawn Clark 5.
And we're not going to say anything else about Dawn Clark, because to do that would be to play a game you and I don't like.
Right.
But everyone, if you don't listen to that episode,
it's episode 12.
You hate me. And you hate yourself. Episode
Trying
12.
to get her on more, because I think she had a little bit of stage fright. But the rapport we just have on the farm is hilarious. So
It's
if she could just
fantastic.
relax a little bit, it would be great.
And the best thing is to listen to that one and then listen to the Jared Taylor one,
there
or
you
back
go.
to back. And then you'll really think, this guy is unlike anyone else.
Pun partially intended. I want to get it, because I've got a friend that we read the week's news before I do the main interview. I want to get Dawn to listen to the main interview, and then we talk about it at like roundup. Well, Dawn, what do you think about this guy who says there were more white slaves? And that'll be a lot of fun.
Okay, Dawn's a black woman. Okay, we're done.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Jim.
Hey.
It's great.
This was the Unregistered Podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. If you want to become a supporting member of the Unregistered community, go to unregisteredunderground.com. To register for the live webinar on Postmodernism on November 2nd, or for the special weekend with me in Los Angeles from November 10th to the 12th, go to thaddeusrussell.com/courses. Thanks for listening.